"Sir, you're in the wrong seat. Move now." The order sliced through the cabin's hush overhead vents, hissing lemon disinfectant air, leather creaking, a child's cut-off giggle. Under the cool white of first-class downlights, Damon Washington looked up from the packet labeled Crosswind Acquisition. Seat 2 amperes framed the winter runway beyond the double-pane window, sodium lamps smearing gold on wet tarmac. The flight attendant's badge caught that light. Janet M. Boone like a metronome, lipstick precise, arms folded into a barrier that shadowed his face, the white man hovering a step behind her steel watch. Travel pillow. Restless foot rolled his eyes toward the aisle, hungry for an audience. "This is my assigned seat," Damon said evenly. He raised his boarding pass between two fingers. 2A. Janet didn't take it. She seized it. Paper snapped. Her glance skimmed the bold 2 amperes and slid off like oil. "Anyone can print a pass," she said. Voice pitched for the cabin. She gestured back with her chin. "This gentleman paid for first class. You need to gather your things and move to the back where you belong." The last 4 words thudded like a suitcase in a quiet stairwell. Ashley Carter, 2B, tipped her phone without flourish. Live glowed red in the corner. Comments started trickling up. "Check it. Scan the barcode." "What's happening?" Damon breathed in slow, air abrading his throat with cold. His thumb settled on the pen, clipped to his pocket black lacquer. Brass clip, dulled by years. His father's pen. "Don't raise your voice first." His father used to say, "Raise your proof." "I'm platinum elite on this route," Damon said. "If you scan, we don't have time for games." Janet cut in. "Compliance first. Complaints later." The man behind her, later he'd be Brad, leaned into the aisle by a performative inch. "Finally some order. I've got a connection in Atlanta. Can we?" He didn't finish the thought. He didn't have to. Ding. The PA breathed final boarding for Flight 447 to ATL. "Doors close in 18 minutes. Please take your seats." The elderly couple in 3 amperes folded together like a single, anxious person. The guy in 4C paused mid-keystroke. Laptop tongue caught on a word. Somewhere behind the curtain, coach exhaled popcorn butter and too many bodies. "Let me scan it," said a younger attendant emerging from the curtain with a handheld reader. His name tag read, Marcus. He kept his tone neutral, almost hopeful. "Back to your section," Janet said, never looking. He evaporated behind the drape, red scanner eye dimming to a blink. Ashley's viewer count nudged 4 digits. "She won't scan it. This is not okay. Stay calm." "Man." A string of angry faces floated up. Damon set his briefcase old, soft, black leather on his knees. The latch clicked with fussy precision. His brass initials on the handle didn't advertise. They didn't need to. "My card," he offered, holding out a matte rectangle without pushing it. "Or call a supervisor." "I am the authority in this cabin," Janet said, palming his pass and keeping it just out of reach. "Like a magician's coin. Either you move voluntarily or we'll have security escort you." The word changed the air pressure. "Is security necessary?" asked the woman in 3 amperes in the steady tone of a retired teacher. "You haven't even—" "Ma'am," Janet said, all corporate patience sharpened to a point. "Thank you." Brad checked his watch theatrically. "We all have places to be. Atlanta won't move a meeting for." He let the sentence hang where everyone could see its silhouette. Damon's phone buzzed. Board session moved to 9:00 a.m. Final vote on AA partnership. He slid it away. Across the glass, runway lights strung themselves like pearls over ink. His thumb tapped the pen once, a metronome for restraint. "Sir." Janet tried again, hand braced on 1 ampere's headrest, as she leaned into his space. "Last chance. Cooperate." "By moving out of my seat," he said, not asking. By moving, she said. Ashley adjusted her angle to include Damon's profile, Janet's badge, Brad's folded arms, the chrome first placard by the bulkhead. She spoke gently to the stream. They still haven't scanned his pass. A toddler's sneaker thumped a seat back until a mother's hand found a tiny ankle. Ding, doors close. In 15 minutes, the lights nudged brighter, like a sky just before a storm breaks. Janet, Marcus said again from the galley shadow. Scanner, half raised. It takes 2 seconds. We are not debating this, she said. Back. Damon breathed. Another click of the pen. Another kitchen table echo. If they won't take your proof, take their narrative. Make them say it out loud. Okay, he said. Call security. He wasn't surrendering. He was recording. Janet keyed her radio. Supervisor to B-17. Security standing by. We have a non-compliant passenger in 2 amperes. Ashley's chat flared. Record everything. He's calm. She's escalating. Ask the gate to scan the barcode. The viewer count climbed a chorus, finding itself. The coach curtain rippled. Phones rose like periscopes. The cabin turned amphitheater a stage. A reluctant lead. An audience that had paid to witness something else, and now couldn't look away. Brad exhaled loudly for nearby microphones. This is exactly why airlines crack down. People try to beat the system and then cry. What system do you think I'm beating? Damon asked softly, inviting the word out into the light. We all work hard, Brad said, which was a proverb disguised as an answer. Another buzz, Carter called. Damon ignored it. He opened the briefcase an inch. Paper released a clean toner odor. He slid out a second boarding stub from an interior sleeve, perforation intact, and set it on the tray like evidence presented to a jury. Scan this, he said to Marcus. Please. Janet's hand moved faster, scooping the stub and creasing it into the crumpled first pass. That's enough. Ding. Final boarding in 12 minutes. The numbers didn't only count minutes, they counted choices. A ground supervisor in a navy blazer appeared at the door, cheeks wind pink from the jet bridge. Mike Stevens glinted on his badge. Behind him, Officer Patricia Williams, airport security, shoulders squared. Expression careful, paused to take in the scene. Eyes flicking phone. Pass. Faces. What's the issue? Mike asked, already aligning with Janet's stance. Passenger refuses to comply with crew instructions, Janet said. Claimed first class, with what appears to be fraudulent documentation. He's delaying departure. Damon offered his pass again. Now, crumpled by other hands, and the platinum card. Scan the barcode, he said, or check the seat map. Mike's glance skimmed, landed on Brad's watch, drifted back to Damon's hoodie and dark jeans, and decided, Sir, I'll need you to step off so we can resolve this at the gate. No, we can resolve it here by scanning, Damon replied. He kept his voice measured, each syllable set down like a piece on a chessboard. Officer Williams accepted the pass and card. Her eyes worked from ink to barcode to seat map on her handheld, brow tightening. The documents appear valid, she said, cautious but clear, and the seat assignment shows 2 amperes under Mr. Washington's name. The crew has discretion over seating, Mike said quickly. We need to protect our schedule. Discretion isn't license. The teacher in 3 amperes murmured. Janet pressed, Sir, you're officially delaying this flight. That can be a federal offense. A hush took the cabin. It wasn't quiet. It was listening. Damon stood slowly, staying within the small geography of the seat. He lifted the briefcase with care, set it on the tray, left it open. Inside, neat stack, tabs, signatures, a silver-edged folder marked Confidential Board Review, Papers that looked like importance even to those who couldn't read their language. "Officer Williams," he said, "I'm not resisting. I'm asking you to witness." She held the pass a second longer, then returned it with a look that said, "I see you," even if her uniform could not say the same. Ashley's live ticked upward. The comment stream widened into strands of law. Policy, outrage, encouragement. Scan. He's right. This is profiling. Be careful. Seer. Brad slid into 2 amperes without being invited. Spine melting into leather. Relief. Performative. Champagne. He said to no one and everyone, trying to make his own timeline the real one. The act pulled a gasp from somewhere around row 4. A businessman shut his laptop with a soft thump like a jaw closing on a retort. The cabin's center of gravity moved, imperceptibly and then obviously, toward Damon. Damon didn't look at Brad. He watched Janet instead, her posture, how her jaw set, how her shoulders leaned a micron more when backed by hierarchy. Then he looked into Ashley's lens, because that's where the record lived now. "My name is Damon Washington," he said for the phone and the room. "See, 2 amperes is printed on my pass." We all heard that. The teacher in 3 amperes said, as if she were logging attendance. "Sir," Mike repeated, sterner now, eyes on the clock over the galley. "Please step off." "Mike," Officer Williams said carefully, "could we verify with the gate scanner? It's 30 seconds. "We're out of time," Janet said. "We have a full cabin and a schedule to maintain." "You had time," Ashley said before she could stop herself, soft but sure. "You just didn't use it." Janet's gaze flicked to Ashley's camera and came back edged. "Ma'am, filming is permitted, but please remain silent." Ashley kept filming. The red dot didn't blink. Damon's phone vibrated again, a rhythm he didn't break to read. He reached into the briefcase's side pocket and felt cardstock. He left it there. Not yet. He slid out a clean copy of his itinerary instead, placed it beside the mangled pass on the tray. 2 proofs like twin exhibits. "Officer," he said, "if I step off, they'll close the door." Officer Williams' mouth tightened. The calculus, ugly and familiar. "Possibly," she said, "but if you remain, they'll escalate." "Escalation is already here," Damon said, glancing at Brad in his seat and back to Janet's folded arms. Ding! Doors close in 9 minutes. The cabin lights cooled a shade, white sliding toward blue. The airplane felt smaller aluminum narrowing under the weight of a single argument about belonging. Brad swiveled toward the aisle, playing to the rows. "Can we not turn this into a spectacle? Some of us have real business to conduct. Some of us are someone else's spectacle, whether we want to be or not," Ashley said to herself, but the mic heard. Janet touched her radio. "Security. Proceed. Passenger is refusing removal." "I'm not refusing," Damon said. "I'm refusing to be wrong because it's convenient." "That's a distinction without a difference," Mike muttered, and several phones captured the sentence as if it were a collectible. Marcus hovered at the curtain edge again, scanner raised like a white flag. Damon met his eyes for 1 beat. Marcus swallowed and lowered it, training stronger than instinct. The jet bridge sighed. A second security officer appeared. 2 pilots peeked from the cockpit door and retreated, their world of procedure allergic to this kind of heat. The smell of rain came in on uniforms and rubber soles. "Sir," Officer Williams said, "lower now. I need you to step into the jet bridge with me. That would make your report easier," Damon said, "and their story cleaner." "I'm asking for safety," she said. "I know," he said, and there was a brief, quiet civility between them, 2 professionals aware of the trap's tripwire. He picked up the briefcase, fingers lingering for a half-second at the pen clip as if touching a talisman. His father at the kitchen table, telling a boy with scraped knees the older truth. "There will be rooms that don't want you, Enter anyway. If they push you out, make them say, why? Damon stood fully. The aisle inhaled. Phones rose a fraction higher. He turned so his body didn't block the tray. So the pass and itinerary and open briefcase remained in frame. If we're going to do this, he said, we're going to be clear. Janet stepped back half a shoe, making way because the choreography required it. Brad tilted his champagne flute that didn't exist. Smugness poured neat. Let the record show, Damon said to Ashley's lens, to the teacher in 3 amperes, to Officer Williams, to the people who would watch this on their couches and phones and find the shape of themselves in its outline, that I asked you to scan my boarding pass, that you refused, that you put another passenger in my seat without verification, that you threatened me with removal for asking you to follow your own policy. A hush, like a drawn bowstring. Let the record show, he continued, that I'm stepping into the jet bridge at the request of security, not because I did anything wrong, but because you decided what I look like means I don't belong here. Janet's jaw tightened. Mike's pen hovered over a form, suddenly heavier than ink. Officer Williams nodded once. Small and human, Ashley kept the phone steady. Viewers poured in, users with flags, with law degrees, with morning shifts and midnight feeds. We see you. We've been there. Don't let them spin it. Damon lifted the briefcase. The pen flashed a tiny tooth of light. He paused with one hand on the armrest, a beat of stillness before motion, like the breath the orchestra takes before the downbeat. Ding. Doors close. In 8 minutes. Let's make sure we all heard the same thing, he said softly. Then he stepped into the narrow mouth of the jet bridge, and the plane swallowed a new silence. Cold air climbed the jet bridge like a draft up a chimney. Fluorescent tubes hummed, washing the corrugated walls in a colorless glow that made everyone look a little more tired, a little less forgiving. Somewhere beyond the bend, a service cart clinked as a catering crew swapped coffee caravels. The plane's doors stood open behind Damon like a proscenium arch to a quieter world, the kind where leather sighed, and people pretended not to watch you. Officer Patricia Williams guided him half a dozen steps onto the ridged metal floor and stopped. She'd kept her voice even, the calm of someone who had quelled arguments at midnight gates and Thanksgiving check-ins. But her eyes had the tightness of a migraine hiding behind them. "Sir," she said, "standard procedure is to verify at the desk. It shouldn't take long." It wouldn't have taken long in there either, Damon said, nodding toward the open door. His breath fogged faintly in the stream of air conditioning. The pen in his pocket felt like it weighed 2 pounds. He tapped it once, an anchor in a moving hallway. Behind him, the cabin remained a tableau. Ashley's phone lens glinted like a small red planet. Brad lounged in 2 amperes, the picture of entitlement at rest. Janet hovered near the aisle, posture a fortress. The curtain to coach breathed in and out as curious faces rose and fell. Officer, the ground supervisor, Mike Stevens, arrived with a gate agent in tow. He had the look of a man who'd sprinted and was pretending he hadn't. "We're under a wheels-up clock. If we miss this window, ATC will hold us on the ground. We need to clear this." The gate agent, early 20s, hair in a tight puff, badge-reading Tina hugged a scanner to her chest, like a library book. She glanced between Damon, Officer Williams, and the open door, as if checking a crosswalk all 3 directions at once. "Let's scan," Patricia said. Simple as gravity. Mike didn't answer her. He turned to Tina. "What does your system show for 2 amperes? Tina juggled tablet and scanner. Her nails were short, cut to the quick. The scanner's red line jittered across Damon's crumpled pass. Found the barcode. Beeped. Her screen populated, blue-white digits reflecting in her irises. Passenger Washington. Damon. Tina read. Voice small but clean. Seat 2 amperes. Status Platinum Pro. Ticketed J class. She swallowed. Boarding completed at 6:02 p.m. Seat verified. Patricia let out a breath so small you had to be standing next to her to hear it. Damon didn't move. Mike stared, as if disbelief could overwrite software. There's also a cabin note, Tina added, thumb sliding. Override at 6:09 p.m. by crew ID. J. Morrison reason code OPR C-topped. She squinted. Operational seating optimization. Patricia's head turned a fraction toward the aircraft, toward Janet's silhouette, framed by entry light glare. What's the policy on operational seating optimization? Damon asked, voice steady as blacktop. He already knew the answer. He wanted it said out loud. It's rare, Tina said. Usually weight and balance, families, ADA always with passenger consent. Documented. Her eyes flicked toward the phone in 2B. Red dot unwavering. And usually not for this. Mike recovered the tone of a man reasserting temperature. Crew has discretion, he said, especially close to door closure. We need to keep the schedule. Discretion isn't license, Patricia said, quiet but pointed. Behind them, the plane breathed. The captain's voice bled faint through the open door, conferring with someone on a headset. A service truck's backup beep pulsed in the middle distance like a metronome you couldn't ignore. Ashley's voice drifted from the cabin. 12,000 watching, she murmured to her audience. Gates scanning now. Mr. Washington. Mike smoothed his tie, though it didn't need smoothing. We can move you to premium economy bulkhead, extra legroom, complimentary drinks. We'll add a voucher for your inconvenience. You'll get to Atlanta all the same. Damon looked at him like a surgeon hearing a patient suggest duct tape. The pen in his pocket warmed against his fingers. Don't raise your voice first. Raise your proof. You have my proof, he said. Mike's smile tightened. We also have one pushback slot. If we miss it, we delay 200 passengers. Roll crews past their duty day. Ripple more delays across other flights. Always impressive how we only expands when it's convenient. Damon said softly, when it comes to my rights, suddenly we gets very small. The jet bridge filled with new footfalls, heels tapping brisk time. Carmen Rodriguez appeared around the bend wearing a blazer-like armor and a look that said she'd put out more fires than she could remember and had scars from the ones no one saw. District manager, 23 years in. She took the scene in the way pilots take a weather report, noting wind shift, barometric pressure, threat vectors. Mr. Washington, she said immediately, extending a hand, because that's what you do when you intend to reset tone. I'm Carmen. I'm here to fix this. Damon shook her hand. His grip was dry, respectful. Not deferring. Then start with the scanner. Tina lifted the tablet, thumbs trembling just enough. Carmen read. Her eyes paused at override by J. Morrison. Then at the code, a muscle twitched near her jaw, the kind of tiny movement that years of corporate neutral had taught her to bury. For a moment, care showed through protocol. Janet, she said into her radio, never looking away from the screen. Confirm your code and justification for a seat override on 2 amperes without passenger consent. Janet's reply came back crisp and not at all apologetic. Gate assigned incorrectly. Passenger disputed. Refused to comply. Made scene. We needed to maintain cabin order. Your justification doesn't appear under policy. Carmen said, operational seating optimization isn't for dispute avoidance. She flicked a look at Mike. We're not moving paying passengers based on optics. Mike's face peeled into something like a shrug. We can sort the policy later. We're 4 minutes from losing the slot. Carmen's radio hissed. Ops to Carmen. If 447 doesn't close doors in 4, tower moves you to the bottom for 26 minutes. There it was. The pressure that made good decisions expensive. Inside the cabin, a passenger cleared his throat to speak and thought better of it. Ashley steadied her phone with both hands. Now, the red dot swelled with viewers. Comments flooded lawyers citing CFR, airline workers DMing back-channel policy pages, a grandmother typing slowly that her grandson had been told to know his place at a gate once, and she hadn't found the words to answer. Mr. Washington, Carmen said, putting a leash on the chaos in her eyes. I'm going to ask you to accept premium economy on this flight. Full refund of fare difference plus $1. Cero, travel credit. I know that doesn't address the principle. I will personally aim to do that once this aircraft is in the air. Right now the schedule. The schedule is not my excuse to accept being made small. Damon said. He didn't step closer, but his voice did. If you want me out of 2 amperes, put in writing why. Sign it. Date it. Cite the policy you used. Make it official. Carmen's breath hitched barely, but Damon heard it. Written record turned crisis into case study into audit. Her eyes cut to Ashley's phone. An audience, multiplied consequences. Mr. Washington. Mike cut in, pronouncing the name like an inconvenience. We don't have time to draft letters. You had 14 minutes to scan a barcode, Damon said. Time was available before you made it scarce. Patricia shifted her weight. Her stance screamed, I'm with decency, even as her uniform whispered, I'm with procedure. Carmen, she said, choosing a first-name intimacy that risked a scold later. The scan shows 2 amperes belongs to him, and now the captain's clock shows 3. Mike snapped. We have 199 other customers to think about. We have 200, Patricia said. Carmen's eyes went to Tina again, who assigned 2 amperes to Mr. Hutchinson. Tina checked, color rising to her cheeks. There's no assignment. He was moved by the same override. His original seat was 7C. Carmen swore under her breath in Spanish, an exhale more than a word. She toggled to the manifest. Bradley Hutchinson. Corporate contract. She knew what that meant. Someone whose employer's travel spend had a hotline. The kind of passenger whose complaints arrived with attached spreadsheets. Carmen lifted her chin in that millimeter way of leaders about to displease someone paid more than them. Mr. Hutchinson needs to return to his original seat, she said into the radio. Now, Janet's voice came back electric. He's already settled. We'll miss departure. Now, Carmen repeated. She didn't raise her volume. She put weight in a single syllable, for a heartbeat. The plane's doorway was a stage with half a dozen plays happening at once. Brad's affronted squawk, Janet's hands chopping air, Ashley's camera catching the choreography from a seat away, Marcus peeking past the curtain like a boy who wants to help and has learned too many ways it can go wrong. The captain's voice popped on. Ups. If we can't close in 2, advised Tower. Carmen made the decision you don't make in a manual. Hold the door, she told the radio. We're correcting an error. You're going to blow the slot. Mike hissed. We're going to keep our dignity. Carmen said, without looking at him. Inside, movement, Janet's posture cracking. The performative calm washing off Brad's face. The slow, reluctant physics of a man standing up from someone else's victory. You could feel the ship tilt as the cabin's moral center slid. Damon didn't smile. He didn't pump a fist or look to the phone for applause. He slid the pen in his pocket between thumb and forefinger. until the clip clicked once. A private metronome. "Mr. Blink, Washington," Carmen said, softer now that her decision had cost her something material. "We'll get you seated." "I'll get seated when you tell the story straight," he said. He tilted his head toward Ashley's lens because that's where public memory lived now. "Your agent will say the override violated policy. Your supervisor will say discretion was used to avoid conflict, and I will say my barcode was clear." Carmen exhaled. "I will say we were wrong," she said. It cost her, and it mattered. Inside, Brad edged down the aisle with the wounded majesty of a dethroned minor royal. Several passengers kept their phones down out of a relic politeness. Most didn't. You could feel the cabin's temperature change, less HVAC, more blood. Janet passed the entryway to fetch his bag from the overhead and met Damon's eyes for the first time off script. Something flickered there. Anger. Yes, but also the sudden unsteadiness of someone whose story about herself had sprung a leak. Then the wall returned. "We'll be reporting your behavior," she said, "to no one in particular, and exactly everyone." Patricia didn't sigh. She looked like she wanted to. "Seat 2 amperes is clear," Carmen said into her radio. Her tone had that thin layer of glass you put over a painting when you're not sure what will be thrown next. "Mr. Washington is returning." Mike's headset squawked. "1 minute. Door must close." "Hold it," Carmen said, and in that instant, she traded 26 minutes of on time for something she'd have to defend in 5 emails, and 1 awkward phone call later. She traded metrics for a mirror. Damon paused at the threshold. Inside the cabin, eyes drank in the doorway like light. Ashley's viewer count rolled past a number that might have had commas. The elderly woman in 3 amperes lifted her chin the way students remember their best teachers do. "Before I sit," Damon said, and Carmen almost laughed, despite herself, because some men insist on a parting shot, and some men have earned a record. "I want the reason for override rescinded in the record." Carmen nodded once at Tina. "Remove the note. Add a corrective one. To Mike, mark the delay as customer justice. Station initiated." Mike blinked. "That's not a code." "It is now," Carmen said. "Sir," Patricia said to Damon, and there was something like warmth under the uniform. "Welcome aboard." He gave her the smallest smile a serious man allows. "Thank you for witnessing," he said. It wasn't a flourish. It was a credit line where it belonged. He stepped back into the cabin. Sound returned to the plane in a carry-on of little noises. A zipper, a cough, a muttered "damn." Ashley tilted her phone to catch him sliding into 2 amperes. He touched the armrest, not in triumph, not even in relief. The gesture was the quiet version of planting a flag. "This is not yours to assign by face." Brad collapsed back into 7C, with the practiced indignation of someone for whom the universe had malfunctioned. Janet stood in the galley, spine rod straight, recalculating how the next 30 minutes would go when the curtain could no longer hide her. Damon buckled his seatbelt. The metal tongues kissed with a tidy click. He closed the briefcase, not with the finality of a gavel, but with the poise of a man returning a weapon to its velvet slot. Ashley's voice, barely above a whisper, threaded into the phone as if through cupped hands. "He's back in 2 amperes. She told 12. No. 15 no. 18,000 people. Gate admitted the override was wrong. The captain's voice slid through the cabin again. "Flight attendants, prepare doors for departure." From the jet bridge, the umbilical power thunked loose. The lights dipped, then steadied as the engines shouldered the load. The door swung, air pressure shifted. A final chorus of phones pinged under airplane mode's descending curtain. Carmen stood to the side like a stage manager whose scene change had gone half right. half wrong and entirely live. Patricia watched her go, and then returned to her orbit. As Damon settled, his phone buzzed one last time before the signal died. The preview line caught his eye despite himself. Carter. We need to talk before morning. He slid the device into the side pocket of the briefcase and rested his fingers on the pen once more. The clip tapped the leather, a sound small enough that only he could hear it syncing with the rising hum of the taxi, a metronome that used to mark homework at a kitchen table and now kept time in an aircraft full of witnesses. He looked at the oval of black outside his window as the plane pushed back. The runway lights drew clean lines through rain, silvering the tarmac. Somewhere, in the fuselage, Janet whispered to a coworker with the brittle tone of someone explaining herself more than the situation. Somewhere in row 7, Brad texted furiously with two thumbs, typing his version to someone paid to listen. Somewhere just behind his shoulder, Ashley watched the viewer count freeze at the moment the cabin went offline and realized that when the world went quiet, stories kept breathing. The nose tug released. The plane pivoted, a slow, elegant spite against gravity. Damon let his hand fall from the pen and onto his thigh. Open. Still. He was not composing a speech in his head. Not yet. He counted the lights passing like fence posts, and listened to the flaps extend, and in that mechanical whir, he heard the oldest lesson he owned. Rooms don't give you your place. You take it with receipts. At the front of the cabin, Carmen leaned to the interphone and spoke softly to the captain. At the back, Marcus slid into a jump seat and closed his eyes for half a breath, then opened them to look straight ahead with a new squareness. In the aisle, Officer Williams gave a small nod to no one in particular, as if blessing a thing fixed, then stepped off the jet bridge and let the door close. Cabin crew, be seated for takeoff. The engines wound up into a clean high note. The runway rose to meet them. Damon set his shoulders against the seat and let the force press him back. Outside the window, white lines blurred into one river. Inside his chest, an older river ran steady. He didn't know that Ashley's stream would explode the moment Wi-Fi came alive at 10,000 feet, that names would trend, that policy memos would flutter like startled birds by morning. He knew only this when they told him to move. He had asked for the rule. When they refused him the rule, he had asked for the record. And now the record was leaving the ground. The jet shuddered once like a horse gathering itself, then surged down the runway, engines burning a clean white line through night and drizzle. Damon felt the push pin him to leather. The vibration ran up through the floorboards and into his spine, a tuning fork that hummed, steadying him in place. On rotation, the cabin tilted. Wheels released the earth, and the city fell away in a lace of sodium lights and rain-slicked roads. The wings sliced through mist. For 3 long seconds the world was only roar and lift, and the thin, taut silence of people holding a collective breath. Then the nose leveled, the chime pinged again, the plane settled into climb, and the world inside the cylinder resumed murmurs. Coughs, the squeak of a cart's brake, the whisper of a curtain flexing. Damon loosened his grip on the armrest. His pen sat under his thumb where it always did, the clip ticking softly against leather like a metronome only he could hear. Across the aisle, Ashley stared at the blanked-out phone screen that had become a mirror of her own wide eyes. The red live dot was gone, but the story wasn't. It had only climbed to 10,000 feet and waited for signal. In the galley, Janet Morrison braced her hands on stainless steel and breathed like someone cooling glass. The mask of procedure had cracks, now hair slightly out of place, a shine at her temples, a paper towel crushed too tight. She stared at the service manual without seeing it. Pages fluttered in the AC draft like they were trying to escape. Coffee service in 10, Rosa said, sliding into the galley behind her. The chief flight attendant's voice was all edges softened to protect the blade. Then light snacks. Keep it neutral. Janet didn't turn. Neutral, she repeated, as if pronouncing a foreign word. Rosa refilled a carafe. We correct quietly and keep the flight moving. Janet closed the manual and turned. Composure reassembled screw by screw. Some of us tried to keep it moving, she said, just shy of insubordination. Some of us chose to blow the slot for optics. Some of us chose policy over habit, Rosa said. She met Janet's eyes long enough to remind her where authority lived. Service, please. Janet pivoted, smoothed her apron like armor, and stepped into the aisle with the smile she'd used for a decade to make problems smaller. Her gaze slid toward 2 amperes, then away. The tray in her hands clinked once, a tiny treason committed by physics and nerves. Coffee, she asked Ashley, arriving at 2B with a too-sweet tone. Ashley pegged the smile for what it was, and nodded anyway. Black, she said. Thanks. Janet poured, not spilling a drop. And for you, sire. She addressed Damon without looking at him. He set his pen across the briefcase seam and let it balance there. Bridge-like. Water, he said. No ice. Of course. She served it with a sponge-clean napkin, corner folded precisely. A ceremony of control. Damon took the glass, his eyes unreadable. Ms. Morrison, he said, calm as a banker's lobby. If you're drafting an incident report tonight, note that the gate scan confirmed 2 amperes. Her nostrils flared once. We document relevant fact, she said. That will be relevant, he said. Janet moved on, smiling at no one this time. Ashley leaned toward the aisle when Janet cleared, voice low. You okay? Define okay, Damon said, mouth pulling to one side. I mean, she gestured vaguely at everything. That, all that. He looked at his water as if clarity came by osmosis. I'm not surprised, he said. Surprise is a luxury you can't afford. If you want your blood pressure to reach 70, Ashley huffed a laugh she didn't know she'd kept in her chest. My chat went nuts. Thousands of people. Laviers. Pilots. Someone said their mom works FAA. They were screenshotting everything. Damon nodded, unsurprised. Truth travels faster at ground level than it ever did at 35,000 feet. A ding. Seatbelts off. The cabin shifted into its second act. People stood to peel hoodies, adjust suit jackets, peek down aisles like prairie dogs in business casual. Somewhere mid-cabin, a baby set the tone for humanity by deciding to practice grief on and off for the next hour. Carmen stepped in from the jump seat behind the cockpit, blazer off now, sleeves pushed to mid-forearm. She followed the center line down to 2 amperes and stopped, palms open in the international sign of no concealed weapons. Mr. Washington, she said softly, thank you for your patience. Damon's face didn't unfurl so much as relax 1 degree. Ms. Rodriguez, I've filed a preliminary corrective with ops for the delay, she said. We'll own it in the report. I'll be taking formal statements from crew when we land. And from me? Damon asked. And from you? Carmen said. If you'd like to record a statement now, He shook his head once. I'll write it, he said. He tapped the pen with his thumb, a tiny ringing in the leather. I prefer records that survive translation. Understood. Carmen glanced at Ashley. Read the respect in the younger woman's posture. Then back to Damon. Wi-Fi comes on at 10,000. There will be noise. Noise is fine, Damon said. It's heat without light I object to. Carmen exhaled. We'll make light, she said, then moved on. easing down the aisle like a chess player, placing pieces that might keep her queen alive. 3 moves from check. In coach, Marcus unlatched from his jump seat and pulled a cart forward with practiced wrists. He met Janet at the mid-galley, 2 trains passing a junction. For a heartbeat, their eyes met the soft apology of someone who'd wanted to help and the stiff refusal of someone who couldn't afford to admit fault. Janet looked away first. "You good," whispered Tasha, another attendant, sliding glasses onto a tray. Marcus nodded. "You've sit." "I'm not the one who needs that question," he murmured. He pushed the cart forward into a canyon of knees and elbows and overhead bins that hadn't closed right since 2012. Coach was its own country-taped headrests and headphones, like brittle halos, elbows claiming millimeters as if territory could comfort. He offered sodas and small generosities, the kind you only notice when they're missing. When he reached row 12, a man with a crew cut and a camo ball cap lifted his phone out of the crotch of his magazine and held it like a talisman. "That up front," the man said softly. "I'm sorry you had to be in earshot." Marcus kept his smile small. "We're all in earshot," he said. "Some of us pretend we aren't." Up front, Wi-Fi blinked alive, and a constellation of devices lit like a city coming back after a blackout. Ashley's phone reconnected with a cascade of vibrations and banners. She thumbed the live button. Comments poured in like hail on a tin roof. "As Karen, I'm counsel. You have my DM. Save every second. ATC Joe Gate. Override code OPRC topped is being misused. This is going to be bad for them. Mom of 3, my son wears a hoodie everywhere. Thank you for standing your ground." Ashley flicked the camera to Damon, then to Carmen moving down the aisle, to Janet's rigid profile as she performed service with the zeal of the newly audited. She added captions in clean white font. "Gate scan confirmed 2 amperes. Manager admitted error. Passenger back in seat." The count ticked up like a fever. Damon ignored his phone long enough to write. He slid a legal pad from the pocket of his briefcase, because even in an age of glowing rectangles, some words wanted paper, and began his statement in handwriting. His teachers used to compliment. H-line straight, letters marching in quiet order. Statement of facts. Flight 447, 2A. He wrote what the scanner had said, what Janet had said, what Carmen had said, what he had not said. He wrote without weaponizing adjectives, because facts are corrosive enough unaided. His phone buzzed again. The preview showed Carter a first name he didn't use in public, a last name he'd learned to read for smoke. He let it buzz. He could call the CEO of a storied airline later. For now, he was drafting something more important than power. A record anyone could check. "Mr. Washington." The voice at his shoulder was low and careful. Damon looked up to see the businessman in 4C, an older black gentleman with a salt beard and knotty hands, standing in the aisle like a man trained not to block other people's movement. "I didn't say anything," the man said, rueful, admitting defeat. "Back there. I've wanted to in 100 rooms. It never felt like a smart use of my breath." He swallowed. "Thank you for spending yours." Damon put his pen down and offered his hand. "It's expensive breath," he said. "Costs less when someone else shares the bill." The man smiled and squeezed. "Name's Harold." "Damon." Harold nodded toward Janet, now taking orders in row 3. "They teach them to smile through hurricanes," he said. "They teach them who to evacuate first," Damon said. Harold's mouth quirked. "God, that's good." He tapped his temple as if filing it, then moved back to his row, making himself thin around other people's space, the way some men have practiced all their lives. The seatbelt sign chimed again as the plane hit a pocket of rough air. The wing outside Damon's window flexed, a slow, reassuring animal. Somewhere, a glass chattered on a tray. A baby yelped, reconsidered, and went back to sleep. The sky cleared ahead black, to velvet to something like depth, and the aircraft exhaled around it. Janet reached 3 amperes. The elderly woman there, white hair like frost on lace, eyes that had seen fashions come and go and no kindness, when it walked past, lifted her chin with soft authority. You could have looked at his ticket, the woman said. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't apologize for telling the truth. Janet's smile strained at the corners. Ma'am, we were under a time constraint. Time is a poor excuse for bad manners. The woman said, my late husband used to say that. He was a fireman. You rush to save, not to shame. Janet's throat worked. Would you like pretzels or almonds? She asked, running for cover in inventory. Both. The woman said, I'm feeling contrary. Across the aisle, Brad stared at his screen with the brutal concentration of a person trying to write a reality in which he is not the villain. His thumbs flew. His jaw worked. Under the seat in front of him, his briefcase hulked like a black thought. He glanced up and caught Ashley's camera for a split second, then looked past it through it. As if invisibility could be achieved by refusal, Carmen slipped back into first class and crouched beside Damon's seat so she wouldn't talk down to him. I just got an email from corporate, she said. Public relations flagged a live stream. They're asking for statements. Damon sipped water. They'll want to triage liability, he said. They'll want a story, she said. They'll get one, he said. It just won't be theirs alone. Carmen nodded once, accepting the physics of that. I'll keep my crew from attempting spin, she said. We'll write what happened. Your officer on the jet bridge did her job, Damon said. Make sure her report isn't punished for being inconvenient. I will, Carmen said, already composing the email in her head. With the subject line, Witness Statement Williams, Patricia Preserve. She stood to go, then hesitated, lowering her voice. For what it's worth, she said, I had a father who sharpened pencils until they were little knives. He would have liked the way you used yours. Damon looked at the pen like it might remember being wood. They're still knives, he said. Just Keter. She left him with that and moved back to the interphone, where operations and duty day calculators and gate managers lived. Her voice softened and hardened on alternate sentences, one for empathy, one for compliance, like a song written for 2 radios. Ashley turned her lens to Damon's page for a heartbeat, just the heading. Not the words, comments bloom. Write it down, statement of fact. That's it. That's the whole playbook. Grandpa Hal, I used to tell my kids, if it isn't written, it didn't happen. I like this man. Ash zoomed back to faces. A couple in 1D and 1E clinked plastic tumblers softly like a toast at a memorial service. The businessman in 2C watched Damon like he was recalibrating a world map. The PA clicked, and the captain's voice rolled out, warm Midwestern, with a boxwood formality. Folks, this is your captain speaking. We're at our initial altitude, and expecting a smooth ride most of the way. I'd also like to address what some of you witnessed during boarding. We strive to treat all passengers with dignity. When we fall short, we correct, and we learn. On behalf of the crew, I apologize for the disruption and any distress caused. We appreciate your patience. It wasn't a script she'd read before. Some of it was Carmen. Some of it was a woman on her jump seat, thinking about her husband's father and pencils. Some of it was a man in 2 amperes tapping a pen. The apology landed like rain after heat a hiss, then release. It didn't fix anything. It said, we see it. Sometimes that was the first necessary damage. Janet poured 2 more coffees, 2 waters with ice, 3 without. Her hands steadied with repetition. She reached Damon again. The tray hovered. "Anything else I can bring you, Seer?" she asked. The "sir" was polished metal reflective, not warm. Damon looked at her, not around her. The cabin noise was a tide she could hide in. He made his words small to keep them between them. "Bring me policy," he said. "Bring me training that is more than a slide deck. Bring me a line in your manual that says, 'Assumption is not procedure.' Bring me that." Janet's mouth opened. No words arrived. She closed it, set a napkin down useless, immaculate, and moved on. Ashley caught the exchange on the edge of her frame, the negative space of it, the way an absence of speech can be loud enough to trend. Mid-flight settled like a warm quilt. Screens glowed blue with moving maps and quieter movies. Trays clicked open and closed. In coach, Marcus confiscated a comically oversized carry-on someone had wedged in sideways and turned the moment into a joke so good. 3 rows laughed and looked at each other instead of their screens for the first time in an hour. Damon wrote until the lines reached the bottom of the page. He flipped it, wrote a second page thinner, more edges. He included timestamps, names, precise phrases. He resisted metaphor because he trusted juries, official or public, to supply their own. He wrote the last sentence with a calm that read like a verdict. He tucked the pages into a plastic sleeve in the briefcase with documents worth 10 figures. It felt appropriate that paper the thickness of a church program might cost a company more than a dozen ads and a quarter's worth of press releases. His phone buzzed again, a new number. A name he recognized from an industry dinner in Dallas, where men in dark suits praised each other's restraint over steaks, too expensive to eat without guilt. He silenced it. He was not here to trade statements for an upgrade. He was here to set the going rate for dignity. Ashley leaned into the aisle, mouth at the edge of a smile she was trying not to claim. "They're asking for your name," she whispered. He considered for a beat that felt like 2. He had an instinct for anonymity honed by necessity and temperament. Then he thought of Harold in 4C, and the elderly woman in 3 Amperes and Marcus back in coach, making people laugh because he couldn't make a training module, and he nodded. "You can tell them Damon," he said. "Last name Washington." Ashley typed it, and the comments flooded with a collective intake of breath and a smattering of "you have to be kiddings" from people who thought they recognized a name and a jawline from finance articles. He didn't flinch. If power was going to knock, it could do it in public where acoustics were better. Rosa returned to the galley and caught Janet staring at the wall like it might blink. "Take a break," she murmured. "I'll cover your rose." Janet swallowed a protest and a pride that had soured in her mouth. She retreated behind the curtain and put both hands on the counter. Her reflection in the metal was warped lines too long, mouth too small. She thought of the 27 complaint numbers in her employee file, each just annoying enough to ignore, until the pattern spelled a word she didn't want to read. She pressed her knuckles to her forehead. For the first time that night, she looked less angry than afraid. In 2 Amperes, Damon stared out at nothing. Clouds dark as an unlit room, and then the long bruise of horizon where lightning silently stitched distance. He didn't draft speeches in his head yet. He let his mind wander to a younger version of himself, pressed against the cold of a bus window, tracing the condensation with a bite-marked pencil stub, trying to make the line straight without leaning on anything. "Would you?" Ashley began, then stopped herself. "Sorry. You look like you're somewhere else." "I am," he said. He didn't apologize for it. "Can I ask where?" "A cafeteria," he said. "Plastic trays, milk in cartons, a teacher who wrote my name at the top of tests in pencil, because she wanted me to be able to erase it if I didn't like the grade. He smiled. Small. She said I should always keep a record, even of things I threw away. Ashley smiled back. Sounds like somebody who would have liked your statement of fact. She would have drawn hearts around the colon. He said, they let the quiet sit like a companion. The seatbelt sign chimed again. As the aircraft nosed into a thin vein of weather, the cabin obeyed the small ritual belts click. Bags shoved further under, spines pressed back. Damon's pen tip kissed the page and left a dot, a period, and it felt right. When the bumping smoothed, Carmen came back with a single sheet of paper printed on thermal stock and a pen that had lived in a pocket so long the clip had soldered to the cap. We've added the corrective note to the manifest, she said. Would you like a copy for your files? He took it. On the pre-printed lines, his name looked neat. The note read like an afterthought to anyone skimming, to anyone who knew. It was an admission. Thank you, he said, and Carmen hesitated, weighed a phrase, and chose it. And thank you for making me choose the right problem to have. He inclined his head slightly. You chose a delay over a lie. He said, that's a good ratio. She smiled, quick and real, and moved on. Up ahead. The cabin lights dimmed one shade. Blue took over from white. Screens became islands. A baby dreamed. A man snored. A woman scrolled through photos of a boy with a missing front tooth. Ashley typed a caption to close her thread for the night. Before the Wi-Fi hiccuped again over mountains, he didn't raise his voice. He asked for the rule. He asked for the record. She hit post and set the phone face down like a blessing. Damon slid his pen back into the briefcase slot. The clip clicked home. He let his palm rest for a breath on the case, as if the leather might heat enough to soften something scar-tough inside him. Then he closed his eyes, not to sleep, to rehearse the next room. Above a continent he had learned to love and wrestle with in equal measure. An airliner cut a clean line through cold air, toward a morning that would want statements and stories and apologies and plans with bullet points. Behind a curtain, a woman held her own reckoning like a cup too hot to put down. In coach, a young flight attendant made a grandmother laugh. In 2B, a citizen journalist pressed a phone to her chest and felt her heart steady against glass. Damon breathed slow to the rhythm of hydraulics and fans. He had learned a long time ago that altitude doesn't grant you perspective. Work does, and work, done right, leaves receipts. He opened his eyes and looked out again. The wing light blinked, a steady white semaphore against dark. He thought of Harold's hand, Carmen's jaw, Ashley's red dot, Patricia's. We have 200 on the jet bridge. And he didn't smile, but a line at the corner of his mouth loosened. The cabin slept. The record did not. The seatbelt sign pinged back on with a polite chime that lied about everything. The aircraft shouldered into a high-altitude river of rough air, not violent, more like a steady shiver that made cups hum against tray tables and reminded everyone how thin the walls were between sky and story. In 2B, Ashley watched the live comment counter jump like static as Wi-Fi held and dropped and held again. She typed slower, not because her fingers couldn't fly, but because each sentence felt like loading a round. She chose facts, not ammo. Her thumbnail was raw, where she'd worried at it with her teeth. She tucked the finger under her palm and breathed. Across the aisle, Damon reopened the briefcase. The leather sighed. He slid the plastic sleeve with his 2-page statement into a side pocket and pulled out a smaller notebook, black elastic band, corners rounded by years. The first page, written in a younger hand, carried a note in pencil. Keep the temperature down. Keep the receipts up. He smiled without showing teeth and flipped to a clean leaf. Mr. Washington. Carmen's voice, Low, at the edge of the aisle, she crouched again, no altitude or attitude in her body. Operations wants to route all press to corporate. They're asking whether you'll make a comment upon landing. Damon looked up. I will on record, he said. No off-the-cuff absolutions. I'm not a sacrament. Carmen nodded. I'll keep the gate clear of cameras as best we can. He tapped his pen against the notebook's spine once, twice. Don't spend energy fighting cameras, he said. Point them at the right things. The right things, she repeated, as if filing a heading. Copy. Her interphone chirped. She rose, giving Damon a brief, wry smile that looked like two people agreeing to carry a heavy couch downstairs without removing the door first. Janet stood in the galley staring at the ice scoop until the cubes dulled along their edges. She'd changed her bun, smoothed her apron, re-lipsticked courage. The ritual worked on lesser days. Not tonight. Rosa stepped in, set a hand on the counter. Take 5. Rosa said, go breathe where no one needs you. I'm fine, Janet said, automatically. You're not, Rosa said gently. Take 5 anyway. Janet slipped through the aft curtain and into the crew lav. A closet smelling of antiseptic and aluminum. Thin mirror. Blue light that made skin look tired. She pressed both palms to the sink and watched a woman with control written into the fine muscles of her jaw. A knock. Janet? Marcus' voice. Careful. Do you need water? She hesitated. No? A beat. Okay. Holler if you do. He didn't move away. She could sense him still there, a warm presence through a door made of policy. Marcus, she said before she knew she would. Yeah. How do you? She couldn't finish the sentence without admitting the question. She tried anyway. How do you come back to the aisle when you feel seen? He let the quiet breathe. I don't, he said finally. I come back for the person who won't be seen if I don't. The answer lodged somewhere behind her breastbone. She stared at the mirror, as if it might annotate that sentence for her and make it portable. Thank you, she said, sounding like someone borrowing manners. He moved away, his cart bumping a seat leg. His sorry, sir, easy in a way. Hers wasn't tonight. Back in first class. A thin man in a charcoal suit, 2C. The one who'd been watching Damon with new geometry in his eyes leaned forward. Mr. Washington, he said quietly, my name's Aaron Leventhal. I'm with Halberd Equity. We're in AA and Delta. If there's institutional coordination you want on the governance side, Damon didn't let him finish. This isn't a syndicate opportunity, Mr. Leventhal, he said without heat. It's a culture problem. Leventhal flushed. Then his mouth found a smile. The Venn diagram has overlap, he said. I'm aware. I'll call you tomorrow if I need a louder overlap. Understood. Leventhal sat back, chastened but interested. Like a man who'd found a new index to track. Brad pretended not to listen. He scrolled through emails and found his boss's name like an iceberg. You are trending for the wrong reasons. Call me first thing. His thumb hovered over reply and then surrendered to compulsion. Misunderstanding. Passenger was out of line. Crew. Followed policy. He read it. Deleted it. Tried again. He glanced at Janet. At Rosa. At Damon. He wrote, I was wrong. The turbulence thickened. A washboard that made the aisle shimmy. The chime sounded again, and Carmen's voice followed. Folks, we're going to pause service for a few minutes while we ride through some bumps. Please remain seated with seatbelts fastened. Her voice had the velvet of reassurance and the iron of, don't try me. Ashley set her phone to wide and caught the plane's small choreography, a hand over a cup, a mother's palm on a toddler's knee, a man pretending his fear was annoyance and then giving it up for what it was. She pivoted to Damon. He had stilled, spine against leather, eyes open but inward. The pen rested at the gutter of the notebook, like it had found the magnetic north of his attention. She pulled back some moments weren't hers to broadcast. The shutter eased into a sway. Blue returned to the lights. Seatbelt signs stayed on a pilot's way of saying, "We're not out of it yet, but I'll let you think so." Carmen slipped into the forward galley to find Rosa reviewing forms on the little flip-down shelf. "I want your eyes on my draft," Rosa said. "I'm stripping adjectives." Carmen skimmed, nodding. "Good. We'll attach the manifest corrective and scanner log." "And Williams's statement," Rosa said. "And Williams," Carmen said, writing it into the margin like a tally mark. Janet reappeared from the lave with her hairline damp. She reached for the coffee pot. Rosa's hand beat her by a fraction. "Take row 10, Rosa said, handing off responsibility like a paring knife. "Coach could use a hand." Janet blinked. "Me?" "Yes. People are people back there, too." It shouldn't have stung, but it did. She took the pot anyway and walked down the aisle like someone stepping into a pool before remembering water can hold weight if you let it. She found Marcus in row 11, kneeling to retrieve a toy truck from under a seat while the toddler wailed with dignity. He glanced up at Janet from a strange angle, and she felt taller and smaller at the same time. "Coffee," she offered to the mom, who nodded gratefully, her eyes grateful in the way people's eyes get when someone brings them one small mercy at exactly the right moment. "Black," the woman said. "Thank you." Janet poured without shaking. Marcus set the truck on the tray table like a ceremonial return. The toddler's cry hiccuped, then rerouted to a curious hum. Janet heard herself say, softer than she knew she could talk, "It's a cool truck." The toddler considered, then shoved it toward her with the generosity of king. Up front, Damon checked the moving map. A thin white arrow marched across the country like a suturing needle. The ETA ticked forward, then back winds toying with their arrival, as if time were elastic. He opened his inbox. The subject lines read like alarm bells disguised as calendar invites. Robert Carter re-debrief request. FAA request for contact information. Office of Civil Rights. National Morning. Show interview availability. He flagged 2, deleted none. He replied to Carter with a single line. "We'll speak at 0700. Bring compliance and calm." No spin. He added a period, then another. He deleted the second. He had learned economy from men who thought volume was power and wanted to prove otherwise. "Sir," said the businessman in 1D, a tall man with a pilot's shoulders in a banker's suit. He held out a hand. "Name's Sinclair. I fly sometimes, left seat. Not tonight." Obviously, his grin tried to do too much work and then wisely stopped. "I wanted to say, we mess up. We do. We're human. We also land the plane. I hope we land this, too." Damon shook his hand. "So do I," he said. "Landing's only half the job. The walk to the gate matters." Sinclair nodded as if he'd been waiting to hear that sentence from someone for years. "Yes, sir," he said, and returned to his seat with a new thing to carry. The PA clicked again. Carmen's voice. "If you're working press phone, kindly step into the galley so we don't record your entire row. That's a courtesy to your neighbors." A laugh rolled like gentle surf. Humor, as social lubricant, applied with restraint. Ashley's screen lit with a new notification from a handle she didn't expect to see. AA official followed her. A DM popped in. "We appreciate your documentation. Would you be willing to provide the original video file to our investigation?" She stared at the sentence and felt a short spike of fear. "Official asks" had a gravity she hadn't been trained to carry. She typed back, "Yes. I'll send it once I have a copy backed up." Then, because she had learned from Damon in 2 hours what some people never learn in years. She added, "Please confirm chain of custody procedures and preservation steps in writing." She hit send and smiled. The comments loved it. In 3 amperes, the elderly woman with frost hair watched Janet pour coffee down cabin. She turned to her husband's memory, as if it occupied the empty seat beside her. "She's learning," she said softly to the air. "One day late, but learning." Her hand found the rosary in her purse, the beads a habit more than a plea. Brad took a breath that reached the back of his lungs and stood. He stepped into the aisle and hovered at 2 amperes like a man afraid of the ocean and the elevator. Damon looked up, unsurprised. "Sir," Brad said, voice steady, because he'd practiced it twice behind a closed lav door. "I was wrong. A million worse openings existed." Damon allowed that one space. Brad went on. "I wanted that seat. That's not a crime, but what I did after was not in the legal sense. In the human sense, I saw what I wanted to see and called it policy." He swallowed. "I'm sorry." Apologies were often currency counterfeiters' print when the sheriff rides into view. Damon searched Brad's eyes for plastic. He found something messier. "What are you going to do with that sentence?" Damon asked. "Remember it," Brad said, then added, surprising himself, out loud. "At work. Better." Damon said, "Start at home. People forgive policy. They notice habits." Brad nodded, like someone had handed him a very small, very heavy object. He returned to his seat. The comments section, if they could have seen the scene without Ashley's lens, would have argued whether he deserved redemption. History tends to do that at scale. The cabin did not. The cabin breathed and settled and held its judgments in their hands like cups they didn't want to spill on their pants. Carmen's interphone chirped. She listened, chin dipped. A conductor reading new notation. She hung up and crossed to Damon. "Ops confirms media at the gate," she said. "Security will hold them outside the jet bridge. We'll deplane normally." "Good," Damon said. "And corporate comms suggests you exit first. Private path." "Not this time," he said. "I'll walk with everyone else. If the story is about dignity, let's not give it a velvet rope." Carmen allowed herself half a smile. "You're going to be both our headache and our solution, aren't you?" "Depends on the aspirin," he said. She huffed. "I've got generic." "We're not Delta." He almost laughed. "You said it, not me." She looked like she might apologize for the joke. Then she didn't. "Let some air in." Her face decided. She moved to the interphone to tell ground that their first-class passenger would be a regular pedestrian tonight. Janet returned from coach with an empty carafe and a face rearranged by tiny acts, 2 thank yous. One toddler's solemn sharing of a toy truck, a row of teenagers who'd said yes, ma'am, like they'd been taught by someone good. Marcus passed her in the aisle, their bodies almost brushed. She slowed. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" he asked. "For not letting me drown in my own story," she said, a sentence she would have mocked in any other mouth. "Marcus didn't say you're welcome." He nodded and pushed his cart. She stood there a second longer, then kept moving, because momentum can be grace if you let it. The seatbelt sign pinged off again. The cabin shook once, then smoothed, as if a giant hand had run along the fuselage and said, "Enough." The captain came back on. "Looks like we've got a clear path the rest of the way. We're showing an on-time arrival. Thanks again for your patience." Ashley typed one more caption and saved the video to local storage and then to a cloud named for a woman who never let her forget backups were love. She DM'd Officer Patricia Williams. The tag had found the officer on a cousin's account, and the cousin had relayed the message down the hallway of internet family with the efficiency of church news. "Can I credit you by name for the jet bridge check?" The answer came back minutes later. "If it helps others keep their heads, yes." Ashley edited the tail of her video, adding 3 lines over the clip of Patricia reading the boarding pass. Name: Patricia Williams. Job security. Role: did the work. She posted. The comments applauded someone who had done her job in a room full of people performing their fears. Damon's phone vibrated with a text from a number that had once belonged to a man whose signature sat under an FAA logo. "You're pushing boulders in the right direction. We'll be ready for your call." He slid the phone away. He would call. He would also write. He was building a record. The record would be hard to burn. He looked left, out the window. Somewhere down there, the country's dark quilt folded over rail yards and cul-de-sacs and a million kitchen tables. He saw nothing and imagined everything. A boy eating cereal while his mom ironed a shirt on a towel on a counter. A woman grading papers with a TV murmur. A cop coming off shift and checking the locks twice. He felt the aircraft hum around him and thought of how many people would never know their names, entered his calculus. "Do you ever rest?" Ashley asked softly, as if she had read his line of thought. "When the work is clean," he said. "And is it, tonight, cleaner than it started?" The fastened seatbelt's light flickered on one last time. Perfunctory. The chime followed. People stirred, trained by sound. Damon closed the notebook and slid the elastic over it like a man sheathing a blade. Carmen stood at the bulkhead, shoulders squared. Rosa adjusted her tie like a ritual. Janet's hands were steady. Marcus grinned at a kid in a Spider-Man hoodie and got it back 100 watts brighter. The captain's voice: "Cabin crew, prepare for arrival." The engines trimmed. The nose dipped almost imperceptibly. The city rose from the east like embers in a grate waking to a poker. The wing lights flashed. The flaps moved, metal mouths widening, whispering air into lift. Ashley angled her camera to frame not faces but hands. Rosa's on the galley latch. Damon's on the briefcase. Janet's around the pot. Marcus is on the cart handle. Hands that make and break days. "Remember the names," she whispered to her audience. She could no longer see but could feel like heat. "Remember the work. We're about to touch down." The wheels met runway with a chirp like a sneaker on gym floor, and then the long roar of speed turned sideways into brakes. The cabin tilted forward, as if bowing. A handful of people clapped because ritual comforts, and no one shushed them because kindness does. 2. Reverse, thrust, thump. Speed bled off. The runway lights flicked past, then slowed to deliberate pulses. The engines idled. The aircraft breathed. Damon exhaled with it. He looked across the aisle at Ashley. "Now comes the ground game," he said. She lifted the phone. Not to film, but to show him the note she'd typed and not posted. "Ask for the rule. Ask for the record. Share the room." He nodded once. The kind of nod you give another person carrying a corner of the same table. The plane turned off the runway. Taxiway lights washed the cabin in blue. Outside, terminal windows glowed like rows of teeth. Gate agents moved behind glass like fish behind an aquarium panel, unaware they were about to be looked at more closely than fish ever are. The PA clicked one final time. Carmen's voice, steady. "Welcome to New York. For those connecting, we'll have gates shortly. For those deplaning, please remain seated until we've reached the gate." And the seatbelt sign has been extinguished. And on behalf of this crew, thank you for giving us the space to correct. The words hung, not polished, not scripted, honest. The cabin took them, turned them over, put them in pockets. The aircraft crept toward the gate. The jet bridge waited, a gray throat open to receive them. Damon laid his palm on the briefcase again, not for luck, for promise. He looked at the people around him. Carmen, Rosa, Ashley, Harold and 4C, the elderly woman with frost hair, Janet holding a coffee pot like a symbol she wasn't ready to put down, Marcus with a grin that made strangers a little less afraid of daylight. He thought of the pencil stub from the cafeteria, the one that had left gray smudges on his fingers and taught him that erasability is not the same as forgiveness. He thought of the line he had written in his notebook years ago and underlined, "Keep the temperature down. Keep the receipts up." The seatbelt sign clicked off. A dozen buckles popped, then 100. The small percussion of a shared decision. The door opened. Cool air walked in and took a seat. "Shall we?" Damon said to no one in particular, and to everyone. He stood with the rest, not first, not last, just with, and reached for the next room. The jet bridge kissed the forward door with a rubbery thud, a gray mouth sealing to a silver body, a hiss of equalizing pressure, and then the thunk of the latch, small sounds that always made arrivals feel official, like a notary stamping the sky. Carmen stood at the bulkhead and looked back once at her cabin, reading faces the way a meteorologist reads clouds. She lifted the handset. Door 1 left disarmed. A practiced sentence. Tonight it sounded like a verdict overturned. Rosa cracked the door. Cool terminal air rolled in recycled. Lemon cleaner. A faint hint of cinnamon from a concessions cart already hawking morning. Beyond the threshold, 3 people waited: an airport operations manager in a navy blazer, a public relations coordinator with a tablet hugged to her chest, and Officer Patricia Williams, pen tucked behind her ear, eyes alert but kind. She'd swapped the radio for a clipboard and a chain of custody envelope. "Ladies and gentlemen," Carmen said on the PA, her voice softer than the metal around it, "we'll deplane as usual from the front. Please give each other space. If you recorded tonight's events and want to share with the official investigation, Officer Williams will be at the top of the jet bridge." She paused. Then, against every corporate instinct, she added, "Thank you for your patience and for your eyes." Buckles popped. Passengers stood and stretched into their coats and versions of themselves. Damon waited, not rising with the first wave. He slipped the black notebook into his briefcase, clicked it shut, and then opened it again to slide in Ashley's business card. She'd pressed it into his palm just before the ding. Ashley Carter Stories That Move. He smiled at the tag, then stood with a dozen others. Ashley killed the stream before the aisle, thumb lingering a second on the red button. She'd captured enough. Some doors asked to be walked through without a lens. She opened her notes app instead and typed a line, "Gate 17. Felt like a courtroom without robes. "Go ahead," Damon said to the elderly woman in 3 amperes. He reached up and brought down her lightweight carry-on as if it were heavier than it looked. Respect made objects dance. "Bless you," she said, voice as crisp as the rosary in her purse. "Mr. Washington, teach them." "That's the plan," he said. They inched forward. In the doorway, Carmen met Officer Williams's eyes. The officer lifted the chain of custody envelope like a contract. "Ms. Carter," Patricia asked, scanning faces. "Here," Ashley said from behind Damon. Patricia stepped aside, allowing 2 passengers to slip past, and took Ashley's phone for a moment, not to keep, but to show the QR tag on the envelope. "Scan this. It'll take you to a secure upload portal. It timestamps, hashes, and auto-notifies counsel. You'll get a receipt." Ashley exhaled. "You had that ready?" Patricia smiled, brief and tired. "Not my first rodeo," she said. "First time this big." Carmen clocked the exchange and nodded to herself. Process. Made visible. Made trust. Then the airport PR coordinator slid into Carmen's space. "We've set up a quiet room," she whispered. "We can route Mr. Washington through a service corridor. No cameras. Carmen didn't look at Damon when she answered, "He'll walk the jet bridge." The coordinator's smile faltered. The ops manager swallowed and stepped back, sensing an instinct stronger than spin at work. Damon reached the threshold. Patricia angled her body so she could speak to him without blocking traffic. "Sir, Mr. Glaze, Washington." "Damon is fine," he said. "Damon," she repeated, tasting the first name before earning it. "I'd like to take a brief recorded statement at the top of the bridge. No pressure. It's cleaner on timeline if we do it while the memory is warm. Warm memory beats hot takes," he said. "Give me 3 minutes to make 2 calls. Then you can have me." "Deal." She stepped aside. "Welcome to New York." He thanked her and walked into the tunnel. Phone cameras blinked like stars. Not a mob, more like a constellation. Each light attached to a person who wanted evidence for a future argument. He kept his chin level. He didn't wave. He didn't scowl. He let the moment be heavy and didn't try to lift it. Brad followed 3 rows back, shoulders tight. He could feel phones stitching him into other people's narratives. He resisted the reflex to duck. He stayed at his full height, which still felt small. Maybe that was new, discovering your spine isn't just a bone. It's a choice. Janet emerged with the second wave, her eyes finding no purchase. Rosa touched her elbow, not comfort, not censure, simply a locating gesture. "Janet," she said, "Union rep is at the gate. HR asked him to meet you." Janet nodded like someone hearing the floor plan of a burning building. She didn't argue. There's relief in being told where to go when your compass is ash. Marcus pushed his cart to the galley, brakes squeaking, and then slipped his phone from his pocket. A text from his sister, a nurse on the late shift at Elmhurst. "Saw you. Proud of you. Bring plantains Sunday." He grinned, despite himself, and texted back a thumbs up and a frying pan emoji. At the top of the jet bridge, the gate area had been rearranged while they were in the air. Stanchions created a little foyer before the terminal proper, a funnel for deplaning bodies, and a boundary for cameras. A table with 2 bottled waters sat like an offering nobody had asked for. 2 reporters hovered beyond the stanchions with microphones sheathed in foam logos. Security made a loose cordon posture, soft, eyes hard. Carmen stepped into the terminal first and planted herself in the mouth of the funnel. She raised a flat palm at a cameraman who tried to lean past the tape and gave him a smile that said, "I can be polite all night and firm longer." Behind her, Patricia set a portable recorder on the table and checked levels with a practiced twist of a dial. Damon emerged. Murmurs thickened. Several passengers slowed instinctively, forming a half circle without meaning to. "Mr. Washington," a reporter called, voice bobbing above the human noise. "Can you give a statement?" "In a minute," Damon said. "First, Officer Williams has a job to do." He stepped to the table. Patricia hit record and set the device between them. "Please, state your name for the record." "Damon Elijah Washington." "Date of birth?" "May 14th. She continued through the basics. He answered without flourish. Then she asked, "In your words, what occurred on Flight 447 between seat assignment and deplaning?" He gave a summary, like a surgeon's dictation, clear, chronological, unadorned, no adjectives until the last sentence. "And the basis for the crew's actions?" Patricia asked. "Assumption." He said, "Racial. Class. The usual cocktail." She didn't flinch. "Any injuries?" "Not physical. Anything else you'd like to add?" "Yes," he said, and looked up so that the semicircle of witnesses became, briefly, his jury. "I want it on record that the crew corrected course in the air. That matters. It doesn't erase, it does instruct." Patricia clicked stop. The red light died. "Thank you," she said. "I'll need copies of any written materials you referenced." You'll have them by noon, he said. She slid the recorder into the chain of custody bag, sealed it, signed across the flap, and handed him a carbon receipt. Process again. Witnessed. Trust. Accruing interest. Mr. Washington. The reporter tried again. Softer. Just one quote. Damon nodded once. Make it whole, he said. Dignity isn't a perk. It's the ticket. Pens scratched. Thumbs flew. Behind him, Ashley scanned the QR code and watched the upload crawl across her screen. A progress bar like a slow heartbeat. She glanced up and caught Janet in profile at the gate, speaking to a man with a union pin, a silver wing crossed by a ribbon. Their bodies were angled slightly away from the terminal, creating a space that said, "This is not theater." Janet's hands were still for once. The rep nodded more than he spoke. Carmen stepped to Ashley's side, eyes on the crowd. "You got it all?" she asked without looking. "Enough," Ashley said. "Will you send me the link when it's public?" Carmen asked, surprising herself with the request. Ashley turned. "Sure. Why? So I can learn what I missed." The honesty startled them both. Carmen recovered with a half shrug. "I'm better with numbers than with narratives. Narratives have numbers, too," Ashley said. "They just take longer to add up." Carmen gave a small, grateful noise. "I'll remember that." Passengers flowed past stroller folded and shoved. A guitar case. A guy in a Mets cap, humming to tamp down his nerves. Officer Williams thanked 3 separate people for emailing their clips, gave a toddler a sticker shaped like a badge, and refused a high five because she was holding evidence with gloved hands. The kid solemnly bumped her elbow instead. Everyone within 5 feet felt their chests expand a millimeter. Brad reached the mouth of the funnel and almost turned right toward anonymity. He didn't. He stepped left toward Damon. "Sir," he said for the second time in an hour. His voice didn't shake. "If you ever want me to repeat what I said to you on board publicly, I'll do it. I don't want to hide behind your generosity." Damon studied him, then glanced at Ashley. "He'll need practice," he said, "and a moderator who won't let him sand the corners off." "I know someone," Ashley said. Brad exhaled a laugh. "God help me," he said. "He might," Damon said, "but the internet will not brace." Brad nodded. He turned. His phone buzzed like a trapped bee. "Call me now," from his boss. "Love you," from a contact named M. He texted, "On my way." Then "I love you too." Thought about the order of operations, and decided both could be true in either sequence. Janet walked out of the stanchions with the union rep shadowing her. She didn't look at Damon. She stopped 3 paces shy of him anyway, as if pulled by a magnet she'd swallowed. "I'll be in a training room next week," she said, not defiant, not pleading, informational, like a flight time. "And after that, we see," he echoed. He didn't offer absolution. She didn't ask. "Some bridges aren't for crossing together." Rosa approached then, tablet under her arm, spine like a keel. "Damon," she said, "first name, earned on a plane in turbulence. I filed incident reports, grief statements, ops addendum, HR's loop. You were steady." He said, "I was late." She corrected. "Then you were steady," he repeated. "Both can be true." Her posture eased a degree. "I'll send you our training modules. I'll send you better ones," he said. She nodded. "Partnership, not penance." The ops manager cleared his throat. A man who preferred moving aircraft to moving crowds. "We need to clear the gate for boarding," he murmured to Carmen. "Next flight's already at the door." Carmen looked at the waiting passengers, faces curious and annoyed in equal measure. The world did not pause, because a lesson was being taught in the corner. She stepped to the stanchions. "Folks, thank you," she called. If you're not on flight 222 to Charlotte, let's move this meeting down the hall. A few people clapped at the word meeting like civilians, who appreciated leadership more than they admitted. Damon checked his watch. He owed 3 calls and a promise to his mother to text when he landed, no matter how late. He pulled out his phone and typed, "Landed." I was calm, pencil still in the drawer. "Love you." He added a photo of the window frost he'd taken on descent, a small abstract of ice tracing feathers on aluminum. She loved that kind of thing. She'd frame it on her fridge next to grocery lists. Ashley slit beside him. "Car waiting." She asked. "I turned it down," he said. "I'll walk to the curb with everyone. I need to feel the weather." She grinned. "Your PR team must adore you." "They drink," he said. They moved with the thinning crowd. Down the concourse, where a neon pretzel flickered, and a janitor pushed a cart with the patience of monks. Overhead screens rolled a churn of gate changes and zones. 3 TSA agents laughed quietly at a joke that only made sense if you spent your life under fluorescent lights. Life kept doing life, as if a fault line hadn't opened at gate 17. Halfway to baggage claim, Carmen fell in beside Damon one more time. "There's a conference room downstairs we can use for 10 minutes, she said. "Comms. Legal on speaker." 10, he said. "No more." He pointed to Patricia, who was packing up the recorder, "and Officer Williams comes." Patricia looked surprised. "Me? You're the only person in this building I saw do their job from start to finish without angling for optics." He said, "You're in the room." Patricia recovered, slower than usual, because no one ever invited security into corporate calls unless someone was being fired. "Yes, sir," she said. The sir was different now, not subservience, but a salute to a kind of power she could align with. They cut through a service corridor, low ceilings, exposed pipes, a Victorian novel of taped-up notices on a corkboard. The conference room was a rectangle, with a table too big for its lungs and chairs that had learned to squeak in 2 keys. A spider phone sat in the middle, ring lights asleep. Carmen dialed. The speaker purred to life, and then populated with voices: a man named Carter in Dallas, a woman from compliance who sounded like she filed her nails with statutes, a communications director whose vocabulary had pieces like narrative architecture and stakeholder calibration. "Damon," Carter began. Voice 2. "We're grateful you're willing to—" "Stop," Damon said, not unkindly. "Grateful is for banquets. We're doing triage." "Understood," Compliance said briskly. "We have your counsel's memo. We're aligning." "Good. Here's the frame," Damon said. "We don't bury. We don't barter. We show receipts. We outline remedies with budgets and timelines. We don't put the burden of reform on the people we harm." Comms exhaled audibly. "There goes my deck," she said. "A joke with barbs." She turned inward. "Keep your deck," Damon said. "Use it to build the scaffold we need." "Officer Williams." He turned. Patricia leaned forward, eyes flicking to Carmen for a nod. Carmen gave it. "Tell Dallas what a clean chain of evidence looks like when the witnesses are the internet." Patricia laid it out. Secure portal, hash values, redundant storage, read-only access for initial reviewers, witness contact logs, independent custodian. Compliance took notes you could hear, pen hitting paper like small hammers. Rosa added, "We also need a crew debrief protocol that isn't a witch hunt. Learning isn't a firing squad." "Copy," Carter said. "Agreed." "Janet," Damon asked, surprising everyone in the room and himself a little, "what does accountability look like to you?" She flinched as if expecting an ambush, then realized her name had been an invitation. She stood in the doorway, one shoulder still outside, union rep at her back like a dock post. Listening, she said, then learning, then listening again, and carrying the memory of the first harm like a stone in the pocket, not to throw, to remember. Wait. The room held the sentence, turned it over, decided not to argue with a woman who'd met her reflection without flinching. Not bad, Morrison, Rosa said softly, and meant it. Okay, Damon said, 10 minutes are up. You'll have a written plan by 8 a.m. I'll have mine. We'll compare, and we'll both bring scissors. Thank you, Carter said. He meant it in a way that didn't try to spend gratitude as currency. They ended the call. Chairs sighed. Air seemed to move again. Damon looked to Patricia. You good? She nodded. Today was a lot, she said. It'll be more tomorrow, he said. I know, she said. I'm still coming. Me too, he said. They left the room. The service hall fed them back into the public river of the terminal. Baggage claim was already a carousel of human vignette. The reunion hug that knocked a beanie off. The lone suitcase circling like a lost thought. The driver with a sign that said, Nguyen held too low for the person who needed it. At the curb, winter exhaled a lungful of cold. It woke cheeks. It made breath visible proof of life. No one could argue with. Ashley zipped her coat and raised her collar. You really are going to walk out there without handlers, she said, half impressed, half worried. Handlers are for dogs and headlines, he said. I need both to sit. A yellow cab pulled up short of the crosswalk, and the driver tapped the roof twice as if blessing the night. Damon waved it off and pointed at the bus sign down the line. M60. S. B. S. You're kidding, Ashley said. About reform. He shook his head. She laughed. Then Zoberid. Be careful. Always, he said, which wasn't true, but was tonight. Carmen stood by the sliding doors, arms folded, watching like a captain seeing the last life raft push off. Rosa had gone back upstairs to turn a plane. Marcus texted his sister a picture of the pretzel stand because she loved pretzels more than she loved sense. Janet leaned against a column, union rep at her shoulder, both of them sharing a silence that wasn't empty. Brad hugged his wife by the rideshare lane. She wore scrubs and the kind of fatigue you can't fake. He whispered something in her ear, and she kissed his cheek, a small pardon he hadn't asked for but needed. Officer Williams tucked the sealed envelope into a lockbox handoff with a courier who looked like a grad student and moved like a vault. She signed one more line. The courier signed back. People walked past, uninterested in paperwork that would decide whether a company told the truth in public. The bus huffed up, doors folding open with a sigh like a stagehand. Exhaling backstage. Damon stepped on. Ashley hesitated, then climbed after him. They grabbed poles and swayed as the bus shrugged into motion. A teenager in the back tapped out a beat on his thigh. An older man coughed into his scarf and then chuckled at a joke. Only he heard. The city took them in, unceremonious, equal. Ashley thumbed a new note on her phone. Justice is not a private ride. It's public transit. You hold on together over potholes. She saved it without posting. Some lines needed to sit in her pocket like stones. Damon looked out the window at the blue-lit skeleton of the terminal receding behind them. Gate 17 shrank to a small, bright rectangle. Tomorrow would be rooms and cameras and letters with seals. Tonight was a bus, breath making ghosts in cold air, a notebook in a briefcase, and a man repeating to himself like a motif, keep the temperature down, keep the receipts up. The bus turned onto the parkway. Street lights flickered past like a metronome. In seat after seat, strangers did the math of their days and came up with enough. Damon watched their faces reflected faintly in the glass and let the weight of what had begun settle across his shoulders. Not as burden, but as garment. It fit. It would get heavier. He'd chosen it. He closed his eyes for the length of one breath, then another, and when he opened them the city was closer, and the night, despite itself, felt navigable. Morning made the city look like it had been wiped down with a cold cloth. On the 12th floor of a glass building that never quite warmed, a conference room waited with its long table like a runway no one would ever land a plane on. Someone had set out pitchers of water with lemon and bowls of almonds, as if justice were hypoglycemic. Damon arrived without an entourage coat, still smelling of bus diesel, breath white at the edges. He carried the same black notebook and a laptop thin as a thread. Carmen was already there, sleeves rolled, hair twisted off her face like she needed all of it for thinking. Rosa entered behind her, a tablet under her arm and a tiny chipped saint pinned on the inside of her blazer where only she could see it. Across the table, American's CEO, Robert Carter, cheeks shaved so close the skin shone. A general counsel named Hal Rosen, with eyes that counted, communications director Ava McKenna, who looked like she'd slept in her office chair and dreamed in bullet points, and a head of labor relations who measured everything in grievances per minute. A large monitor at the far end showed remote squares compliance, finance, government affairs, a union steward, and, in a corner Teal, Officer Patricia Williams, from a beige room with a cinder-block wall and a coffee maker older than she was. Ava opened, voice thin but steady. We've drafted a provisional statement and a Q&A. We advise acknowledging the incident, accepting responsibility for staff conduct, outlining immediate steps, and emphasizing, no, Damon said gently, not to embarrass, but to save time. He slid a single page across the table. We lead with what happened and why it was wrong. Then we show receipts. Receipts? Carter asked, as if the word might be pejorative. Evidence, timelines, budgets, names attached to actions. Damon said, if you say, we're listening with no line items, the street hears, we're stalling. And Hal leaned forward. With respect, Mr. Washington, we have to weigh admissions against exposure. The more we specify, the more plaintiffs' firms will sue you anyway. Damon finished, and they'll win if your first move is evasive. Confession isn't just moral, it's tactical. Own the narrative, or the narrative owns you. A tiny smile pulled at the corner of Patricia's square. Rosa kept her face neutral, but her foot stilled under the table. Carmen slid a folder to the center. Incident packet, she said. Crew statements. Passenger uploads routed through Officer Williams's portal. Chain of custody log. Time-coded transcripts of the PA and the live stream. Hal's eyebrows rose. You did all that overnight. We live at airports, Carmen said. We speak delay. Ava's eyes softened. She'd expected Stonewall and gotten scaffolding. Comms can structure a press conference at 3, she said. No teleprompter. Clean audio. We'll provide ASL. Make it noon. Damon said. Too aggressive, said Labor Relations. Already defensive. Exactly aggressive enough. Damon replied. You don't pull a Band-Aid at twilight. He opened the notebook. A single sentence weighted in block letters. Dignity is not a perk. He added 2 words under it, show how. First, he said, accountability. Silence rearranged itself into attention. Suspension and training for supervisors who defaulted to forced termination for habitual offenders with documented patterns. You have them, use them. He didn't look at Hal when he said it, but the counsel straightened anyway. Carter cleared his throat. We moved on Morrison last night. Rosa disliked the passive. We fired her. She translated, then, quieter. With cause, Stevens. Damon asked. Suspended 30 days, Ava said, reading from her screen. 80 hours training. Permanent reassignment away from passenger-facing authority. If he completes a remediation plan, he can apply for lateral role. Good, Damon said. Put it in the statement. Names, not initials. The public can feel when we hide behind HR euphemisms, so can your employees. Labor Relations spoke up. Unions will push back about naming individuals. Name leadership decisions then, Damon said, but stop bathing violence in passive voice. Policies were not followed. Means nothing. Say who didn't follow them and who failed to correct them. If that's you, say so. Carter looked like a man deciding whether self-incrimination could be a form of inoculation. He nodded once. I'll say so. Second, Damon continued. Training isn't a video and a quiz. It's practice. Simulations. Role inversion. You want Morrison's replacement to feel a passenger's pulse racing in their own jaw. You want muscle memory for humility. Ava's cursor paused in mid-air. Role inversion. Put crew in street clothes and make them ride a service for a day where everything about them is coded out of place. He said, then put managers on camera. While a teenager records feel the lens, then talk about policy. Hal lifted 2 fingers. We need to consult with counsel about liability in such exercises. Do that, Damon said. Call it experiential learning. The risk of not doing it is higher. In the corner tile, Patricia leaned toward her webcam. Add de-escalation to the front of everything, she said. Training always puts it last. Like a nice-to-have. Build it in like CPR. Carmen turned a page on her legal pad. We also need a real-time escalation path that doesn't run through ego, she said. When a crew member calls for backup, the first person who shows up shouldn't be the person with the most seniority. It should be the person least triggered by confrontation. Who decides that? Labor Relations asked. People who work with them every day. Rosa said, we know who rushes to no and who stays in maybe. We pretend seniority equals wisdom because it's easier to count years than dispositions. Hal scribbled something. It might have been disposition metric or get better pens. Third, Damon said, tapping his notebook. Blow the doors off the complaint process. App with a big red button. Anonymous if needed. Guaranteed human contact within 24 hours. Publish the response time. Publish outcomes. If it's only internal, it didn't happen. Ava's face brightened like a plant turned toward light. We can ship a beta in 6 weeks. If we borrow the skeleton from our Lost Bag app, borrow the skeleton. Damon said, build a spine. He turned to Rosa. Crew bodies need margin. A stressed organism defaults to bias. What are your buffers? Rosa didn't blink. We're broken, she said simply. Turn times got 10 minutes here, 12 there. Staffing trimmed to minimums. Scheduling that treats sleep like an elective. You want your people to see human nuance at the door. Give them 1 more person per cabin and 10 more minutes per turn. Or keep starving the system and then act surprised when it cannibalizes. Finance unmuted. That's hundreds of millions in operating expense. Cheaper than 1,000 small lawsuits and 1 large shutdown. Damon said, budget it. Put the number on a slide. We'll show the street why it's not charity. It's risk management. A beat. Then Carter approved. Hal winced. Finance inhaled. Ava grinned, despite herself. Carmen wrote the number on the pad and underlined it twice. Fourth, Damon said, voice from the outside. Ombuds that report to the CEO, not to anyone who can bury them. Quarterly audits by third parties. You don't pay to be kind. Publish all of it, even the ugly parts, especially the ugly part. Ava raised a hand without meaning to. If we publish the ugly parts, the press eats us. The public sees a body healing, Damon said. Scars are proof of repair. Fifth, he added, pipeline, scholarships, apprenticeships, paid internships, targeted recruitment, not a press release. Dollars, people, seats in classrooms, seats on jump seats. Carter nodded slowly, as if matching the rhythm of the word seats. 50 million. He said, make it 60. Damon said, include housing stipends. Poor students can't intern for prestige and hunger. 60. Carter corrected himself aloud, like someone learning a new pronunciation. Last, Damon said, closing the notebook. We need a line, a truth cut so clean nobody can grab it without bleeding. He looked to Ava. You can write it. Get someone in creative who's mad on purpose. Ava's eyes glassed for a second. She swallowed. I know exactly who. Patricia spoke again. One more thing, she said. Tell your security people they're allowed to be human. We're taught to be walls. Sometimes we're bridges. Reward that. Carter looked at her on the screen as if seeing the idea of her for the first time. We will. Okay, Damon said, standing. Noon. They broke. The room reeked of lemon and resolve. Ava walked out with Carmen and Rosa. Thumbs, summoning crews and cameras. Hal stayed seated, staring at the table wood grain like it might reveal a loophole. Carter lingered in the doorway, a man calculating a cost he might finally be willing to pay. In a smaller room down the hall, they staged the press conference. No rim light tricks, no teleprompter. As promised, black drape behind a lectern, handwritten notes with strike-throughs and margin stars, two flags that looked less like props and more like VFW Hall leftovers worn. Honest. Chairs for employees in uniform, not VIPs. Janet sat in the second row with her union rep on one side and a counselor she hadn't expected to see on the other. He'd found her in the hallway and stood without talking until she sat. She held a paper cup of water with both hands, as if it knew how to stay level. Brad arrived because he said he would. Ashley arrived because she never imagined not. Officer Williams found a spot against the wall near an exit. A bit. Marcus slipped in a beat late, hair still wet from a shower stolen between the end of a red-eye and the beginning of a new job he wasn't sure he deserved. At 1159, Ava walked to the microphone. She didn't tap it. She didn't ask if people could hear her. She liked to assume competence and fix anything that broke. We'll start on time, she said. We'll end on truth. She introduced Carter. He didn't thank anyone. He didn't smile. We failed, he said, not in a single moment. In a pattern, we trained our people to move planes fast and forgot to train their hearts to move slow. He named Janet and Mike. He named Rosa and Carmen. He named Officer Williams. He named Damon. He named what had happened, without the phrase perception of. He said racial, he said profiling, he said wrong. Then Damon took the lectern. I'll be brief, he said. A wealthy black man was treated like a thief. Imagine what happens to everyone who isn't wealthy. We're fixing it, not with posters, with payroll, with product, with power. He turned slightly, not for cameras, but for the employees. You were given impossible math, he said. Turn times that require teleportation, staffing that presumes no one cries, a rule book that tells you to be firm, and a culture that punishes you for being kind. If kindness takes 90 seconds, we will change the math. You will change the habits. He stepped back. Ava returned. Read two sentences that must have cost her to write because her eyes shined. Dignity is not a perk. It is the ticket. If you can't hand it to every passenger, you don't belong in this uniform. The room didn't clap. They didn't know if they were supposed to. Then Marcus started, a metronome by himself, and others joined until it wasn't applause, so much as a weather pattern. human hands trying to sound like a promise. Reporters barked questions. Hal stood just off stage, ready to catch and rephrase. But the questions weren't the same old. A young woman from a local paper asked about de-escalation scripts for new hires. A man with a beard like a protest sign asked about contract clauses tying bonuses to complaint reductions. A veteran asked about disability accommodations in training. People heard the word dignity and added their own notes to the cord after. In the narrow corridor smelling of extension cords and coffee, Ashley cornered Ava. "That line," she said, "dignity is the ticket. Mind if I use it as a chapter title?" "Please," Ava said. "Write the chapter we never would." Rosa found Janet by a utility closet. "You staying for the afternoon session?" she asked. "I don't know," Janet said. "My stomach thinks it's a fist." Rosa nodded. "Mine too," she said. "Come anyway." She tilted her head toward a small training room where folding chairs waited to be scuffed. "We can watch the bad tapes together." Janet's mouth twisted. "There are tapes. There are always tapes," Rosa said. "Today we don't look away." Downstairs, in a room with buzzing lights, Carmen laid out a grid. Crews sat in small circles, watching clips from last night with their own faces blurred to protect identities and egos. The exercise was simple and cruel. Pause at the moment before the wrong turn. Script, 3 other choices. Rehearse them out loud. People hated it. People needed it. You could feel the bone resetting. Marcus partnered with a new hire who confessed he froze when men twice his size raised their voices. Marcus showed him the anchor he used on rough nights. Count a passenger's breaths, like you're watching surf. Inhale 1, exhale 2. People who count don't shout. In a glassed-in office, Hal and Labor Relations drafted a memo that bored them policy language. Definitions, sanctions. They were at their best when language was precise. Today, precise would save someone later. In a cab idling outside, Brad called his boss and told the truth without garnish. In a break room, Patricia poured a coffee she had earned thrice over, and let herself laugh once at a meme. Her partner texted Damon photoshopped as a superhero in a suit, cape, made of stock charts. She rolled her eyes and saved it anyway. At 3:12 p.m., the first pushback arrived, a statement from a pilots' association warning of mission creep and overreach, and safety concerns. Masquerading as social engineering, Ava drafted a reply that acknowledged safety as sacred and bias as antithetical to it. Carmen suggested bringing 3 captains into the room who had flown through storms without fetishizing turbulence. They recorded a video, 2 women, 1 man, one of them brown, one with white hair that refused to be tamed. "The cockpit doesn't fear equality," one said, "it fears sloppiness. Bias is sloppy." At 4:06 p.m., a politician with a talent for throwing water on any fire that wasn't his own tweeted about woke airlines and customer service theater. Ashley rolled her eyes so hard she saw yesterday. Damon didn't respond. The stock ticked up 0.5 point. At 5:30, the first grief email hit Damon's public inbox. A man describing his father being escorted off a plane because his English broke when asked to switch seats. They said he was uncooperative. The son wrote, he thought he was being punished. Damon read it, put the pencil point down on the margin, and wrote call. He didn't know what he would say yet. He knew he would call. By evening, the city changed color again. The newsroom shows rolled their theme music like tanks. Clips of the press conference played on a loop. Ava's line, Carter's confession, Damon's small bow toward the employees. Commentators talked like they were scoring a boxing match. Out where the planes slept and woke, ground crews kept marshalling lights like glow-in-the-dark wands. at a children's show. People still needed to go places. People still returned from them. In a training room with bad carpet, Janet watched herself from 2 months ago on grainy CCTV, telling a woman that her bag was too big for first. The woman had unzipped it and removed a folded sweater. The sweater had a rainbow embroidered on the chest. Janet remembered the sensation in her body that day. Urgency, like static. Impatience, like a taste. She watched now and felt heat crawl up her neck. Pause, Rosa said softly. Name 3 other choices. Janet swallowed. Ask if I can help her repack. She said. Offer to gate check at no charge. Shut up for 5 seconds and count. Rosa nodded. Pick one and stand up. She said, say it to me. Janet stood. She was not a small woman. For the first time in a while, she made herself smaller. May I help you repack? She said. It came out careful. It came out like an apology, practicing to be a policy. Rosa smiled with her eyes. Again, she said. Across town, Damon sat at a small table in his mother's kitchen. The apartment smelled like onions hitting oil and then surrendering to sweetness. Ms. Washington stirred the pot like she interrogated it. I saw, she said, not proud, not frantic, reporting the weather. I kept the pencil in the drawer, he said. I heard, she said. She tasted, tilted salt in like wisdom. You sounded like your father when he taught Sunday school, scared the kids and made them want to be better. He laughed. That man didn't scare anyone. He scared your excuses, she said. He kissed her cheek. Guilty, he said. She turned the flame down. You look tired, she said. I am, he said. You'll sleep when this chapter closes, she said. Chapters don't close themselves. He set his phone on the table. It vibrated with news updates, meeting reminders. A text from Ava we did noon. From Carmen tomorrow, 8 a.m. Training floor. From an unknown number with a union area code. Thank you for not making us monsters. We can be better. He typed yes back and left it at that. They ate in easy silence. Spoons against bowls. Steam against glasses. After, he washed dishes because it felt like an honest kind of forward motion to make water hot and soap louder than thought. He dried his hand. He opened the black notebook and added 3 bullet points under the day's line. Publish the ugly parts. Change the math. Count breaths before policy. He closed it. He put the pencil in the drawer and left it open an inch. Not a superstition. A reminder that restraint is a tool you keep visible. In Queens, a bus exhaled at a stop and let 3 night shift nurses climb aboard with coffee that could strip paint. A boy practiced his free throws at a hoop, missing a net. A plane ascended into a sky that still believed in itself. At gate 17, a new crew read names in their heads and practiced saying them like gifts, not obstacles. Somewhere between an apology and a budget, a system had begun to move, not fast, not slow, in the right direction. Enough for one day. Tomorrow would require more ruin and more repair. That's how buildings are renovated without closing. Carmen had said earlier, half to herself, you work a section at a time. You let people live under scaffolding. You keep the exits clear. Damon stood at the window and watched the streetlight switch from green to yellow to red and back again. Ancient ritual of permission and restraint. He thought of a seat number that had nearly become a story about shame and had instead become a story about design. He whispered the line once to the empty room like a benediction he believed in. Maybe for the first time, dignity is the ticket. He turned off the kitchen light and left the window glowing. Outside, the city kept its nervous, gorgeous promise, make it better or don't come home. He intended to come home. By sunrise, the city had clipped itself into a brittle grin, Headlines marched across screens with the discipline of bad news. Woke or working. Airline's new protocol sparks industry war. Talk radio found its favorite word overreach and needed it until it squeaked. Hashtags bloomed like algae. Keep flight safe. No politics in the aisle. Dignity is the ticket fought back. Smaller but louder, pulsing with first-person stories and grainy clips of apologies that didn't dodge. Damon woke before the alarm and read three things in bed. A text from Ava with a clip of last night's local news. An email from Hal with the subject line, "We should talk." And a private message from a pilot he didn't know, written at Zwei Einsteins A.M. I've flown medevac in storms, and I've flown after funerals. Bias is a weather system in the cockpit. 2. Don't let the loudest voice define safety. CPT. I. Coles. DFW. In the kitchen, the black notebook waited with yesterday's sentence. Dignity is not a perk. Still fresh enough to smell like ink. He drew a small square next to it and wrote count breaths before policy. He left the pencil in the drawer, the gap an inch wide, a tiny, deliberate wound in the wood. At 8:00 a.m., the glass box, the executive conference room with the careless view of the skyline filled with people, and a new kind of pressure, Carmen laid out a revised rollout grid. Ava parked a coffee the color of intent near her laptop. Rosa carried a ring-bound stack of training tweaks, with thumb tabs like flags in a conquered city. Hal walked in on the dot, suit darker than yesterday, eyes like a ledger. He dropped a printed email on the table. This went out at 2 this morning. From an anonymized account to every crew forum worth the name, he said, subject, whose safety counts, body. If you let a billionaire engineer your cockpit, you'll spend the next crisis apologizing while you fall. Management is selling you compliance theater. They'll fire you for a tone, not fund you for a turnaround. Ask yourself, who benefits when security stands down? It's not just crew, Hal added, Pilots Association, gate agents groups, a handful of ops managers. It reads like a manifesto, and it's gaining traction. Who wrote it? Carmen asked. Anonymous, Hal said, but the cadence smells like someone who's been in our rooms. Ava scrolled. There's a parallel campaign online, she said. AstroTurf, farmed accounts posing as crew spouses and small investors. The tagline is safety, not sensitivity. Someone put money behind this. Damon leaned back. Someone who liked how yesterday felt before noon. He said, we changed the math. They're trying to change the narrative. Rosa flipped a tab. The training floors felt it at 7. She said, 2 senior flight attendants told my facilitators they'd rather take a write-up than rehearse role inversion. A crew lead actually said, I'm not going to pretend to be poor for your performance. We paused that group and brought in different faces. Carmen stared at the edge of the table, then tapped it once. We need a town hall, she said. No stage lights, chairs in a circle. Damon, Ava, me. 2 crew who hate this, 2 who love it. Marcus facilitating. Ava nodded. Today, 4 o'clock, she said. No cameras. People lie to cameras. Hal slid another sheet toward Damon. Before that, he said, Government Affairs flagged a whisper that the House Transportation Chair is drafting a letter to the FAA requesting a review of safety risks presented by non-operational equality mandates. He wants a headline. We can't give him an accident. We were never going to give him an accident, Carmen said flatly. We're going to give him numbers and a pilot with gray hair talking about cognitive load. Damon's phone buzzed. Unknown caller, SEC, Division of Enforcement. He took it. Washington. A clean, not unfriendly voice. "Mr. Washington, this is Joanne Leland with the SEC. We received a complaint regarding potential market manipulation tied to last night's events. We'd like voluntary cooperation. You are not the subject of an investigation at this time. Send me the list." Damon said. "We'll open our logs and produce our protocols. We notified regulators about the audit 3 weeks ago. Our air is clean. We appreciate your candor," Leland said. "Candor goes faster." When he hung up, Hal's eyebrows lifted a notch. "Market manipulation. That's the blow they throw when the moral one fails." "Then we answer both," Damon said, publicly, quietly, thoroughly. At 11, he walked out of the building to feel weather that wasn't fluorescent. Midtown had put on its daytime costume, delivery riders dodging cab, a man carrying a ficus like contraband hope, a street preacher telling a fire hydrant about redemption. At the corner, a woman in scrubs looked up from her phone and recognized him. She didn't ask for a selfie. She touched her chest like she'd startled her own heart. "My mother," she said. "She cried watching you say it. She doesn't cry at screens." "Tell her I cried at screens." "Too," Damon said. 2 steps later, a man in a jacket with a microbrewery logo said, "Thanks for delaying my flight, boss," and didn't wait for an answer. "The city gave you your poll numbers in sidewalk samples. Back inside." 3 meetings, stacked like plates. The first internal comms with department heads, who wanted to know whether the new policy would punish them for doing their jobs. "It will punish you for doing someone else's badly," Damon said. "No one's getting written up for telling a drunk to sit down." The second finance, on how to book the added staffing as a multi-year investment, not a one-year wound. "You're not sinking money," he said. "You're buying less chaos." The third, a quiet sit-down with Hal in an office that still smelled faintly of wax and older decisions. Hal closed the door. For a second his shoulders dropped, the way a man unbuttons a collar in a room that forgives it. "You didn't come here to be liked," he said. Not exactly a question. "I didn't come here to be avoided," Damon replied. Hal looked at the ceiling as if a legal paragraph might be printed there. "For 25 years, I've been the person who says, 'We can't,' until time runs out or the story dies," he said. "It's a muscle I built while watching companies survive long enough to fail again. Yesterday, I watched a CEO say, 'We did,' before I could say, 'We mustn't.' It offended me professionally. It also relieved me." He let the words sit in the air like a paper cup on a lectern. "I'll handle the SEC," he said. "Full cooperation. No spin." "Why?" Damon asked. "Because I want to be the kind of lawyer my daughter thinks I am when she tells her friends what I do," Hal said. He blinked. The only admission he could afford. Also because the alternative is 1,000 discovery requests from hungry plaintiffs' firms who smell blood and can't tell the difference between a transfusion and a feast. "You'll have what you need," Damon said. And Hal, "Yes. Thank you for saying the quiet thing out loud." Hal's mouth moved in something that wasn't a smile but wasn't its enemy. "Don't make me regret it," he said, and left. At 4, the town hall convened in a training room that had been rearranged to look less like a classroom and more like an intervention. No stage, no table, a circle of mismatched chairs, the kind that made your knees remember they were joints, a whiteboard on the wall with 2 columns, harm and help. Marcus stood at the front. Not front, he took the spot where his eyes could meet all the others without looking down. "House rules," he said. "We talk to each other, not at phones. We don't win points by breaking hearts. We take breath breaks. If you need to step out, step out. If you're here to throw a chair, tell me first. so I can remove the chairs. Laughter small, grateful cracked the shell on the room. People settled into the possibility that nobody had to be a villain to make a point. The first to speak was a woman in her 50s with a lanyard frayed from too many gate doors. "I don't know how to do my job and also be a therapist," she said. "The last 10 years, they cut and told us to smile harder. I'm out of smile." Rosa nodded. "Then the company gives you more hands," she said, "and we stop calling exhaustion attitude. We can't hand you a broken machine and then write you up for leaking oil." A man in a crew jacket raised his hand. He was compact and coiled like he'd run upstairs for a living. "I'm Asian," he said. "Passengers think I don't speak English until I write them up, and then I speak fluent policy. I've watched white coworkers assume a black teenager was a problem because he wore his hood up. I've watched black coworkers assume a white older man was harmless when he was drunk enough to be a hazard. Bias isn't a white thing, it's a human thing, but the consequences land harder on some of us." He looked at Damon, then away. "I don't want to be told I'm racist when I say I need backup." Lights on. "No one's putting you on a list for requesting help," Carmen said. "We're putting systems on a list for failing to give it." Then it happened. Friction found a match, a tall, raw-nerved supervisor named Lyle Tattoo, sneaking out from his cuff jaw. A constant grind leaned forward in his chair. "So I'm supposed to stand there and count breaths, while a dude in 2 amperes refuses to move, and the captain's in my ear about pushback." His voice had the wobble of a freshly poured drink. "Sometimes, yes," Damon said. "Count 3. Ask one more question. Look again. The 90 seconds you steal from schedule might save you 90 days of hell." Lyle snorted. "Easy for you to say. You're not on the line. My people carry bags and disrespect and the flu because sick days are fairy tale. You come in here with your notebook and your words, and you make me the problem." Silence clung to the ceiling, waiting for gravity. The room didn't breathe. Then Marcus stepped nearer to Lyle, far enough to be safe, close enough to be present. "Tell me your worst night this year," Marcus said softly. Lyle blinked. The pivot disarmed him. "December 23rd, he said. "System meltdown. Snow, 2 diversions. A kid threw up on me. A woman cried because we lost her dog for an hour. My crew lead went home sick. I stayed 15 hours and forgot to eat." Marcus nodded and nodded again. "You did hero work," he said. "Everyone who flew on the 23rd owes you sleep." Lyle's jaw eased 1 notch, and Marcus continued, "On your worst night, if a black man in a hoodie had your seat assignment, would you have looked at his pass?" Lyle's eyes skittered. He tried on a shrug, found it didn't fit. "I want to say yes," he said, "but I hear myself, and I know." "Then we build you a system that makes the right choice easier, even when you're empty," Damon said. "Extra hands, then extra minutes. An escalation path that listens more, and we give you the feeling that if you screw up, the first step is repair, not ruin." Lyle's breath went out of him like a suitcase finally zipped. "All right," he said. "Show me the system. Don't just give me a slogan." Ava tapped the whiteboard under help and wrote staffing plus 10 minutes escalation path, repair first. Under harm, someone had written in block letters, assuming. 2 hours later, the chairs were still full. People had cried once, laughed 6 times, sworn creatively. An exhausted gate agent named Priya had designed a better line management script on the fly. Ava had already texted it to copywriters. A baggage handler described the math that forced him to toss instead of place. Finance would see that slide tomorrow. At the end, Marcus said, "We'll be back here next week. Same circle. Bring someone who didn't come because they said circles are dumb." As the room emptied, Lyle stopped at the door. He folded a piece of paper into a helicopter and set it on the chair he'd occupied. "For the kid who puked on me," he said, half smiling. "I hope he made it home." At 7, Damon met Ava on a bench outside, the kind favored by smokers and people who needed to stare at trees. They watched two planes climb like ideas that wouldn't apologize for being big. Town hall work, Ava said. It hurt, but it worked. It gave people a place to put their hurt. Damon said. Her phone pinged. She looked once and handed it to him without a word. A tweet. Screen-capped and freshly viral. Breaking temporary restraining order. Granted. Pilots Association wins injunction halting implementation of the Washington Protocol pending safety review. Underneath, the comments ate each other alive. Filed in federal court in the Fifth Circuit. Ava said, "Baby." His mother said, skipping hello. Someone slid a note under the door with a cartoon. "You want to hear it." His chest tightened the way a rope tightens around a ship cleat. "Read it." She did. The drawing was crude and ugly. A stick figure in a suit being yanked from a first-class seat by another stick figure in a uniform. The caption said, "Know your altitude." No return address. No signature. Cowardice, never carried one. "You all right?" he asked. "I'm not made of papier-mâché," she said. "I put it in the sink and poured water on it until it learned shame." He closed his eyes, then opened them and let the room back in. "I'll have someone sit outside your door tonight. You'll have someone eat," she countered. "You sound hollow." Then, softer. "Don't pick up the pencil for this." He looked at the drawer. The inch of open wood was a mouth in a quiet scream. "Yvonne," he said. "Good," she said. "Go back to building. Leave the breaking to fools." He hung up and stared at the city long enough to watch a plane become a star, and then a nothing. He thought about how many rooms today had doors that refused to lock, town halls with raw nerves, union offices with faxes that still worked, a judge's chambers with law thick as hide, a kitchen in Queens with watercolor threats dissolving in the sink. He walked back to the table. "We keep going," he said. "We don't let a TRO teach us despair. We rename the pieces they hate and deliver the outcomes they can't argue with." Ava capped her pen. "What do we call the AI when we bring it back?" "Eyes that don't get tired," Carmen said. "Call it assistance, not intelligence." Hal added, "Judges prefer humility." Damon wrote a single line under the day in his notebook. "Sacrifice is a strategy, not a surrender." He clicked the drawer an inch more closed. Not kite flush. Restraint deserved its inch. Outside, the blowback engine whined. The sound that comes after a big day when systems push air backward to cool. Planes landed. Planes launched. Somewhere a pilot with white hair set a mug down and opened an email from a lawyer he didn't know. Somewhere, a supervisor named Lyle threw the paper helicopter in a trash can, and then, reconsidering, set it on a shelf. Tomorrow, the judge would decide how fast a reform was allowed to move. Tonight, the people who would live inside it chose not to flinch. The promise still fit in a mouth. Even with chipped teeth, dignity is the ticket. The courthouse looked like it had been cast in a single pour of stone, faceless and certain about everything except the weather. A gray morning pressed down on Dallas. The flag over the entrance snapped in a crosswind, like it disagreed with the day's agenda. By 8 o'clock, a small crowd had formed on the wide steps. Two clusters, two climates. On the left, crew uniforms under hoodies, a hand-lettered sign reading "Safety First," always in block letters. On the right, travelers in office wear and college sweatshirts holding "Dignity is the ticket" printouts from a download link that Ava had pushed at 4:00 a.m. Ava stood at the curb, phone in one hand. a stack of one-page fact sheets. In the other, what the Washington Protocol actually does and doesn't, with bullet points so simple a judge's clerk could read them while stirring coffee. She wore flats she could run in, and a navy blazer that made questions slow down long enough to become sentences. The first reporter who approached asked if AI was going to run the planes. She handed him the sheet and said, "We build tools for humans. Then we train human. Only then do we test the tools." We paused the scariest word. We kept the safest action. Even a camera nodded. Inside, the federal district courtroom cut the city out completely. No windows, just varnished wood and air conditioning set to stalemate. A seal watched over the bench like a coin that had forgotten it could be spent. The Judge Reynolds had the kind of face that had seen all the expressions and wasn't impressed by any. Hal took the table on the right with a yellow legal pad he'd cut into lanes. Facts, law, story, landmines. He uncapped a pen that wrote without apologizing to paper. Next to him, Damon loosened his tie a half-inch because honesty breathes better. Carmen placed a binder in front of her, with colored tabs like a rainbow had been disciplined into usefulness. Officer Patricia Williams sat behind them in uniform, composure ironed into every seam. Rosa and Marcus took seats 2 rows back, notebooks open, eyes forward. At the end of the row, a tall man with white hair and a pilot's posture sat with his hat on his knees. Captain Isaiah Coles, 31,000 hours. A storm diary in human form. Opposite, the Pilots Association lawyer, Whitaker, arranged himself with the unconcern of a man who had never needed to tug his jacket sleeves down in a mirror and wonder if they told the truth about his arms. He was sharp, expensive, and wore the expression of someone confident that the word irreparable had more gravity than inevitable. Case number 25-0-711. The clerk said, voice like a ruler, straight and flat. Pilots Association VLAC, American Airlines AL. Motion to dissolve temporary restraining order. Judge Reynolds looked over his glasses at both tables. Counsel, I've read the briefs, the declarations, and last night's emergency filings. Let's do this without theater. Mr. Whitaker. Whitaker stood, buttoning himself into conviction. Your Honor, this is simple. Our clients do not oppose equal treatment. They oppose untested mandates that compromise the operational chain of command. The Washington Protocol, whatever its intentions, introduces ambiguity into flight deck authority and prioritizes optics over calculus. The TRO preserves safety while we sort the politics. Hal rose, unhurried, no theater. Your Honor, excellent, because this is math, not melodrama. The protocol adds bodies, not burdens. It asks frontline staff to check facts before they escalate conflict, and it funds those extra checks. Dignity and discipline are not rival concepts. They're mutually reinforcing controls. Reynolds leaned back. Mr. Caldwell, your brief indicates voluntary pauses already implemented. Yes, Hal said. We paused the AI monitoring pilot to avoid litigating acronyms. We retained the human parts de-escalation scripts, additional staffing, an independent ombuds function that falls squarely within management's prerogative to organize workplace functions. Pilots' concerns about cockpit authority are addressed. Nothing in the protocol modifies captaincy. Whitaker moved fast. Intentions aside, Your Honor, internal communications show a rollout at speed and at scale that outpaces safety vetting. Item 22. The training module labeled Role Inversion Inviting staff to perform vulnerability. In public settings, we object. Pilots are not participants in social experiments. They are custodians of aluminum tubes moving at 500 miles an hour. Reynolds put a hand up. We're not going to relabel everything with jargon you think will frighten me. I have flown commercial. A ripple of laughter, quickly strangled. Mr. Caldwell, call your first witness. Hal called Officer Williams. Patricia took the stand. Right hand up. Oath like a rhythm, she knew truth. Nothing but Hal guided her gently. Officer Williams, how long have you worked airport security? 10 years. In that time, have you encountered situations where a calmer, slower initial approach prevented escalation? Yes, many. One in particular, holiday rush, gate change, mess. A passenger black man, business suit, was accused of pushing past a family. He hadn't. My breathing stayed slow. I checked the manifest, found the gate agent had misread the display. We avoided cuffs and an engine delay. Later, I learned the threatening gesture was him pointing at his hearing aid. You carry a scar from the job. Here, she said, lifting the cuff of her sleeve to show a thin crescent near the wrist, a pale comma made of pain. Bar fight spillover at the concourse. Calm didn't mean inaction, but it meant fewer batons, with the elements of the Washington Protocol: extra staffing, structured de-escalation, independent review, help or hurt your work. Help, she said. Fewer bad assumptions, faster corrections when we make them. People do better when they know someone will check. Whitaker stood for cross like a man rising to tug weeds. Officer Williams, you're not a pilot. No, you don't make decisions at FL 350 when seconds. No, she said. I make them on concrete with coffee, breath, and crying toddlers. That's where most trouble starts. That's all. He sat, unhappy not to have drawn blood. Hal called Captain Coles. Isaiah took the oath with a small nod that looked like gratitude owed to gravity. Up close, the white in his hair wasn't resignation, it was accumulated weather. Captain, Hal said, would you tell the court your flight hours and certifications? 31,000 hours. Type rated on 5 airframes. Former Air National Guard. Safety Committee Chair. DFW Local. Have you ever had to make a decision that required both assertiveness and humility at once? The captain's mouth tugged into a fond grimace. Any night with a crosswind and Kansas under you. The courtroom smiled because Kansas had never been accused of drama. Last year, Coles said, I had a situation in the cabin 2 rows from first overhead bin dispute turned into identity politics in 60 seconds. Flight attendant flagged me with the code we use for this. Is getting sharp. Old model says announce authority. New model, this protocol says send backup. Check fact. Speak like you're on the same side of the door. What did you do? I sent my FO to monitor the instruments, and I walked 10 feet into the cabin. I knelt. People quieter when you change eye level. I asked each person to tell me their version in 10 words or less. Then I repeated back what I heard. 2 things became true. A woman's bag had been moved, and a man's sense of being dismissed had gotten loud. We found both a solution and a second bin. We took off on time. Old me might have thrown a rule book at it. New me recognized we fly a tube full of human beings, not just pounds of payload. Whitaker's turn. Captain Coles, do you support any encroachment on cockpit authority by HR? Cole's eyes cool. No. Do you support training that asks flight crews to role-play feelings while the clock? I support training that reminds me I'm not flying cargo. Coles said, if you want an automaton, here out toaster. Snickers escaped before decorum slapped them. Nothing further. Whitaker said, but his tone had lost a notch of varnish. Hal called Lyle. The supervisor's suit didn't fit like a suit so much as a dare. His tie was too tight and not tight enough. He took the oath and held it like a hot thing that had finally revealed its burn. "Mr. Barnett," Hal said, "what's your job?" "Gate Operations Supervisor. Nights. DFW." "What was December 23rd? "Hell," Lyle said, and the word came out tired. The judge didn't rebuke him. "System meltdown. I made 1,000 micro-decisions with a stomach that thought coffee was a food group. What does the protocol do for you on that kind of night? Gives me 2 extra people and 10 extra minutes per crisis. 1 to check the manifest while I deal with the person, 1 to breathe for me when mine runs out." He swallowed. "And a policy that says the first mistake isn't the end of me. Would that make you sloppy?" "It would make me human without being punished for it." Whitaker rose with the inevitable knife. "Mr. Barnett, did you attend the role inversion module?" "Yeah." "Were you asked to pretend to be poor?" "I was asked to remember I couldn't see the whole story. I didn't need acting lessons. I needed a better script for talking to people." Whitaker looked for a trapdoor. The floor refused to cooperate. No further questions. There was a hum in the room now, low and steady. It sounded like a plane that had found air it liked. Reynolds laced his fingers. "Counsel, let's discuss scope. I am not here to micromanage a private company, nor am I here to bless vagueness. The TRO was an emergency measure. Emergencies must be brief. Mr. Whitaker, why should I restrain staffing decisions or communication training? Those look like management's call." Whitaker used his eyebrows like commas. "Because the documents show speed without safety sign-off, the court should preserve status quo ante until." "Until," Reynolds said, "you can make your members feel heard, not just obeyed." "A recess. 10 minutes to let the air cool." In the hallway, a runner in shirt sleeves found Ava and thrust a manila envelope into her hand, with the secrecy of a spy and the posture of a paralegal. "From a friend," he said, and vanished into the neutral carpet. Inside, printed screenshots of a group chat labeled "Ops Right Now," names partially redacted, but not cleverly. A participant E.P. cheerleading yesterday's anonymous manifesto. Another W. Black forwarding a memo from an advisory firm. And a third, Harland posting a ticker graph of a carve-out short position against the airline's stock with a comment "Hubris pays." Ava's stomach did a small, precise flip. She slid the pages to Hal without the performative gasp a worse PR person would have used. He read, mouth flattening. "We can't try a securities case in a TRO hearing," he said softly, "but we can suggest to His Honor that there's more than safety in the room." Back in session, Hal kept his voice very small and very careful. "Your Honor, in camera, we can proffer materials indicating that some internal opposition is being amplified by parties taking positions against the company's value. We are cooperating with the SEC. We are not alleging the Pilots Association is party to this. We are asking the court to note that safety is not the only motive that can create loudness." Whitaker objected with the heat of a man shown a shadow and told it wasn't his. "Slander?" Reynolds raised a palm. "That's enough. Take your adjectives home. This is a safety hearing. Mr. Caldwell, I accept your representation that you're cooperating with regulatory inquiries. We will not admit those materials today, but we will proceed under the assumption that noise and safety are not synonyms." He shuffled papers. When a judge rearranges paper, sometimes they're just making paper neat. This time, he was arranging the logic. "The TRO is modified," Reynolds said. "Effective immediately. The court restrains implementation of any component touching cockpit authority or in-flight emergency protocols until a joint safety review with the Pilots Association is completed. The court does not restrain additional staffing, de-escalation training, or establishment of an independent ombuds office. AI monitoring paused voluntarily shall remain paused, pending that joint review. The parties will file a status report in 14 days. I expect adults. If you bring me a food fight, I will keep you both after school. Gavel. Not a slam, more like a firm period. Outside, microphones sprouted like dandelions. Ava stepped up, before anyone could ask if computers would be landing planes. We appreciate the court's clarity, she said. Today, a judge told us what we already believe: safety and dignity are not enemies. We're adding hands and training now. For the pieces that touch the cockpit, we will build with the pilots, not around them. We'll be back with a joint plan in 2 weeks. Reporters peppered. Isn't this a defeat? Are you walking back? Progress with a plan beats victory without one, Ava said. She kept her smile small and earned. Whitaker gave his own scrum a phrase about judicial prudence and safety guardrails. He looked like a man whose client had gotten the thing it needed most time to be respected. Carmen found Captain Coles on the steps. He had his hat on again. It made him look like a promise. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you," he replied. "It's nice to be invited to write the checklist instead of fix the crash." Officer Williams approached Damon. "Judge talks like my grandmother," she said. "Short sentences. No nonsense. Kind enough to leave the door open when he closes it. You did good in there," Damon said. "No," she said. "We did good before we got there. Courtrooms only ratify work already done." A text buzzed in Damon's pocket. His mother judge on TV looked like he missed supper. "Eat something that crunches." He smiled at the screen, then at the sky, pretending to be blue. They debriefed in a side conference room at the hotel across the street, a sterile cube softened by the fatigue of people inside it. Hal drew a box on his pad and wrote 2-week plan. "We convene a joint safety committee tomorrow," Carmen said. 2 pilots from the association, 1 captain, 1 F.O., 2 flight attendants, 1 skeptic, 1 believer. Ops lead. Marcus facilitates. We walk them through the AI in plain English and invite edits. We rename it. "Rename it what?" Marcus asked. "Assisted alerting," Ava said, or fatigue guard. People accept things that sound like what they already want. Pilot ownership matters. Coles said, if they can see the code as a mirror to their own checklist logic, they'll stop seeing it as a scold. Hal nodded. "We formalize the cooperation in a stipulation and file it with the court before the 14-day report. Judges love homework turned in early." Rosa flipped to a new tab. "Meanwhile, we roll out the pieces we can. 2 extra bodies per trouble gate. New de-escalation scripts. A hotline that goes to a human who can say yes. We make a billboard out of the phrase, 'First mistake, repair, not ruin.' And I want a pilot on our internal broadcast tomorrow morning." Damon said, "Not me. Not Carmen. Someone with gray hair, who knows how to land in crosswinds. Isaiah." Coles shrugged as if asked to help move a couch. "I'll shave," he said. "I'm better when I've shaved." They laughed real. Brief. The kind that comes when a boulder has rolled an inch downhill. At 3, the glass box in New York, refilled with people who had just watched Dallas bend without breaking. Screens lit the walls with live social sentiment charts that twitched like EKGs. Dignity is the ticket stabilized. Safety first recalibrated into safety and dignity. The compromise, hashtag. Damon stood at the head of the table and didn't touch the pencil drawer. "We got a ruling that makes us better if we let it," he said. "We paused the right piece. we kept the heart. For the folks who still feel unseen, you're up next. In the room, with the code and the checklist and the whiteboard. 2 weeks from now, we show the judge and the country what it looks like when people who disagree build the same ladder. Ava clicked to the next slide, Town Halls Round 2. Marcus would host the same circles in Houston and Charlotte. Lyle had texted that he'd bring 2 supervisors who hated circles but liked outcomes. Hal's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his posture lifted a yes without a smile. SEC just confirmed receipt of our production schedule, he said. They appreciate the early cooperation. We're not the story they want. Carmen's tablet pinged with a calendar. Accept Pilots Association Joint Safety Committee. Tomorrow 9:00 a.m. DFW. She exhaled like she'd pulled a thorn from a paw. They broke. People returned texts to spouses and children and mothers who dissolved mean notes in sinks. Damon lingered at the window. Midtown at dusk looked like a hospital corridor, clean, endless, promising salvage and asking patience. He checked his phone. A voicemail from Hal that he'd missed in the shuffle. No, not Hal Harriet, his first mentor, the woman who taught him the smell of a deal that could end you. He listened. You're doing the thing we are told not to do, moving before the market says you can. Keep your receipts and keep your humility. Pride breaks faster than policy. Also, don't forget to sleep. Fatigue makes cowards poetic. He laughed, then wrote it down for the book. Fatigue makes cowards poetic. He underlined poetic. Then he wrote the line he'd been circling for days, but hadn't put to paper because he wasn't sure he could mean it without pretending. Make room for the person who will replace you. He closed the notebook, left the pencil where it was horizontal. Restful, not a weapon. Night put the courthouse back in the dark and gave the steps to pigeons. In Dallas, a captain ironed a shirt in a quiet hotel, thinking about a new broadcast he'd record at dawn. In Queens, a mother rinsed glue off her fingers and said out loud to her kitchen, "We're not made to bend forever." In an anonymous office, someone who had thought shorting a company would be easier than changing one refreshed a stock chart that no longer obeyed him. 2 weeks would pass like rain with a flight attached. There would be more hearings and fewer headlines. The protocol would grow bones where it had been cartilage. The AI would get a new name and a pilot's hands on its birth certificate, and the sentence would keep fitting in mouths that had learned to say hard things without spitting. Dignity is not a perk, it's part of how we fly. By mid-morning, the glass box hummed like a nervous instrument. In the war room, the screens showed a split weather map, one half the Joint Safety Committee's agenda, assisted alerting rename pending fatigue guard thresholds. Captains sign off the other, half a pulse of headlines that refused to stay still. A blog nobody respected had posted a leak from inside American AI. Listens to passengers. Flags, threatening tone. The pull quote was worse. New program will score customer behavior in real time. The phrase, score customer behavior, wasn't in any document Ava had ever written. Unless someone had borrowed it. Ava opened her private folder and dragged a window until it snapped neatly to the left. 3 nights ago, she'd canary-trapped the inner circle. Same page. 3 versions, each with a tiny seed phrase, planted like a dye packet. To Whitaker, through his friendly editor at Ops, she sent score customer behavior. To W. Black, the pilot-turned-consultant sniffing around the investor calls, she sent audible escalation index. To E. P. at facilities, a rumor conduit in a good suit, she sent speech pattern guardrails. It wasn't paranoia. It was what you did, when the room felt colder than the thermostat. Now the blog's quote blinked in her face like a red light camera. Score customer behavior. Whitaker's seed. She didn't say anything yet. She breathed through her nose. Once, twice, the kind of slow that moves things toward the right time. Then she slid the window to the right and called Damon. He answered on the first ring with the voice he used when the building tilted. Tell me, Whitaker's pipeline is live. The phrase is his. We need to assume they'll aim it at the union and the press by afternoon. How loud? Loud enough to knock bricks loose, but not load-bearing ones. If we move now, bring Hal. We'll do this clean. By the time Hal and Carmen reached Conference 3, Ava had built the stack screenshots of the Canary files, server logs, that mapped the outgoing packet to an IP block belonging to an advisory firm that loved to tell airlines to human-proof their brand, and the blog post itself now multiplying in aggregation like a rumor in a high school with better fonts. Hal clicked his pen. We can't accuse opposing counsel. He'll sue the accusation before we finish the sentence. We can document that adversarial messaging is being seeded with false language, and we can publish our own draft with final wording, and the safety committee signatures turn their leak into our version control. Carmen nodded, jaw tight. And we can call the union before the press sees it. No blindsiding. Even if Whitaker plays cute, his members won't appreciate being used as gas in someone else's car. Damon leaned against the table's edge, a posture that put him on the same plane as gravity. Do it. Ava pulled up a clean tab and began typing the release she'd been half writing in her head since 4 a.m. Fact check. No, we're not scoring humans. Our draft uses assisted alerting to flag staff fatigue cues, not passenger speech. No audio is captured or stored. No model runs without a captain's signed acceptance. Today's working session with the Pilots Association will finalize thresholds. We'll publish the checklist we wrote together. Because safety and dignity are built, not marketed. She added one more line underlined by tone, not HTML. If you didn't write the checklist, you don't get to scare people with it. Hal read over her shoulder and grunted approval. Ship it after we call Coles. They patched Captain Coles into a three-way with the association's vice chair, a woman named Taryn, with a voice like straight wire. Coles did the thing he'd promised. He made them co-authors. Taryn, it's Isaiah. I've got their draft. It isn't Big Brother. It's a checklist. With a sensor on the margins, the tool pings us. Then we decide. If we don't like the ping, we pull the plug. If we do, we keep it. But nobody wires anything into my ship without my yes. Your yes. A beat. The sounds of a crew room in the background, coffee, thunk, someone muttering about a gate change. Send it, Taryn said. And don't make me read Latin. I have a turn in 52 minutes. Ava smiled and changed in situ to in place. She hit send to the pilot's inbox before her knuckles remembered what pressing keys could cost. At DFW, the Joint Safety Committee assembled in a bland conference room that smelled like printer heat. A whiteboard took up one wall. Marcus wheeled in a cart with bottled water and 4 colors of dry erase markers because ink mattered. Rosa set out folders. 2 pilots from the association came in together. Taryn with a braid tucked under her ball cap, and a first officer named Malik with a fatigue app open on his phone like a confession. 2 flight attendants arrived a minute later, a skeptic named Bev, who wore her seniority like a jacket she'd paid for, and a believer Joel, who had been on the receiving end of too many, sir. Please return to your seats that turned into something sharper. Okay, Marcus said, palms open like he was making room for an idea. not a fight. Today, we rename a thing until it stops scaring us. We draw a box no one can climb out of without a captain's key, and we write the rollback first. If the tool misbehaves, it gets put in timeout. They work. It wasn't pretty. Bev hated the word AI like a betrayal. Taryn hated ambiguity more than turbulence. Malik confessed that on day 4 of a long bid, the instrument lights sometimes blurred at the edges. Joel offered sentences that had de-escalated dueling briefcases 2 days earlier in Charlotte. Rosa wrote, "Pilot, override, equals, big red button," in letters you could see from the door in 2IARET. When the break came, no one reached for their phones first. They reached for their shoulders. The room had somehow made the muscles there stop climbing toward ears. "Let's pick a name before lunch." Marcus said, "Fatigue guard." Malik offered, "Crew assist." Joel said, "Call it what it does." Taryn said, "Heads up." She underlined the words twice. "It pings. We look. If we don't like the ping, we turn it off. But heads up is what we say when we catch each other about to walk into the wingtip." Bev tapped the marker against the table. "I can live with that." Marcus drew a box around heads up and drew a little pilot's hat above it, because he was not immune to joy. By noon, they had the thing that turned rumor into posture. A 3-page co-authored operational note signed by the 4 of them, with a line at the bottom that said, "No component of this system shall activate without captain acceptance, and may be disengaged by captain at any time." They added an ombuds hotline that rang through to a person whose entire job was to say yes, when yes would fix a human thing faster than an email chain. Marcus snapped a photo of the 4 signatures, calluses, and ink in one frame, and sent it to Ava with the caption, "Write our caption." Ava pushed it onto the company feed with "Made by the people who fly, not the people who write press releases." Then she did her actual job and wrote the press release. Back in New York, the other half of the story sharpened. Hal's associate, a woman with detective eyes, traced the IP that sent the seed phrase to the blog through a relay the advisory firm used for client outreach. The relay took them to an internal Slack export that an unhappy analyst had quietly shared with an SEC tip line. The channel name was Tasteful Reputation Risk. The messages weren't E.P. Push the scoring angle, makes it sound Minority Report. W. Black got wit to whisper it to a friendly. Also, Harlan says to keep feeding the short sellers. Human rights bullets. PR bleeds faster than profit and loss. Harlan trades on hubris space. The last line glowed like a match head in a dry attic. Hal didn't smile. He looked tired in a way that lived behind his eyes. "We go to the SEC now." Quietly. "We also go to the board." Loudly. "If any director is within 2 degrees of Harlan, I want to know before dinner." Damon didn't sit. He stood by the window so the skyline could witness the promise he was about to make. "We go public with what we can without compromising the SEC. We show the receipts. We tell people where we're going and who's trying to shove us off the road." Ava shook her head. "Not just who's trying. Why? Fear of losing control is older than every piece of code we'll ever write. Say that out loud. It makes the fear less magic." Carmen pressed her tablet into her palm like it had a pulse. "One more thing," she said. "This is going to keep looking like Damon's crusade unless we widen the base. The ombuds is good. The committee is good. But power still runs on who signs checks." Damon turned. He knew the next sentence because it had been pacing in him since Atlanta, tapping the glass of every reflective surface he passed. "A worker trust," he said. 5% of my voting rights transfer to a trust governed by frontline representatives, pilots, crew, gate." Maintenance. They get a binding say on dignity protocols and safety implementations that touch the cabin. I lose unilateral control there. We make it a covenant, not a campaign. The room went very quiet. Hal let out a breath between his teeth. That's not cosmetic, he said. That's a bone. Good, Damon said. Bones hold you up? Ava felt it like a click behind her sternum. The puzzle piece that every statement in the past week had been trying to circle will get killed by some investors, she said, practical as a winter coat. But the rest will understand that leverage isn't just debt. Then we teach them, Damon said. Again. They staged the reveal at a town hall in Hangar 5, steel ribs, concrete floor. The smell of hydraulic fluid and coffee that had been sitting since dawn. No stage lights, just a rolling scaffold with a lectern clamped to it, and a mic check that echoed twice before obeying. Rosa opened because she had earned the right. She spoke first in Spanish, then in English, saying the same sentence both ways. We are not at war with each other. Marcus introduced the committee's heads-up note and read the pilot override clause out loud, slow enough for the maintenance guys along the wall to mouth the words with him. Taryn came up in her ball cap and said, I sign nothing I don't use. I'll use this. Bev nodded next to her and didn't look like she had lost. She looked like she had landed. Then Damon stepped up. He wore his sleeves rolled because the hangar heat had opinions and because honesty needs forearms sometimes. Some of you think I want to run your airplanes with a spreadsheet, he said. I don't. I want you to run them with your brains and your checklists and your hands with a tool that taps your shoulder when you're about to miss a thing because you're human and you've been awake since a time the clock doesn't admit to. We built that tool with your people. We paused the scary piece. We named it Heads Up. He let the murmur pass, then put the bone on the table. And because dignity can't depend on the mood of a CEO, not even on a good day, I'm transferring 5% of my voting rights to a worker trust. Governed by frontline reps, they will have a binding say on protocols that touch your work and your dignity. I will not be able to overrule them. If you are terrified of that, good. So am I. We will fly anyway. The sound wasn't applause at first. It was something like a collective exhale that turned into hands when it found movement. In the back, Lyle leaned against a strut and felt his throat do a thing he didn't know it could do at work. When the clapping rolled over him, he texted his wife one line, "A boss gave away power on purpose." She replied with a photo of their daughter's glue-stained fingers holding a crooked paper crown. Crowns are stronger when they fold. She wrote, outside the hangar, cameras had formed a respectful semicircle. Ava gave them 30 seconds of framing. Pilot leaders signed the note. The tool is non-audio, non-recording, opt-in by captain, off at will. And yes, the worker trust is real. The paperwork filed tonight. We'll publish the charter. A reporter asked about the leak. Ava didn't blink. We don't build with gossip, she said. We build with signatures. She held up the page that had 4 of them and 3 smudges of dry erase ink where someone had grabbed too soon. At 6:15 p.m., the SEC's auto-reply was replaced by a phone call. The agent's voice sounded like a man who knew what a calendar could do when it sharpened itself. They scheduled a meeting for the following morning. Hal would bring the Slack screenshots labeled as Exhibits A through Phoenix because he had run out of letters in the alphabet and liked birds better. At 7:03, an email hit Damon's inbox from W. Black, the advisory firm. No subject line, no salutation, just, "You don't know what buildings fall when you push one brick." Damon read it twice, then forwarded it to Hal and the SEC agent without comment. He opened his notebook and wrote 4 words under the line he'd drawn at dawn. Bricks were meant stacked. At 9:40, Taryn's voice went live from a crew room. She recorded a 1-minute video on her phone, no hair, no PR, and posted it to the union's site. "We looked at the thing," she said. "We changed the thing. We own the thing. If you don't like a ping, you kill it and report the false alarm like you'd report a faulty annunciator. That's it. That's the tweet." She didn't actually tweet. She had someone do that. But the clip moved like truth moves short legs. Long memory. Around 10, Ava finally let herself check on the thing she had been holding inside her chest like contraband. The footage from the parking garage. The night she was attacked, 2 shadows, a fall of keys, the sound of breath hitting cement. She'd refused to watch it until something in the day said she could survive it without becoming only it. She watched once. When her body started to rock, she stopped the video and put her hand on the pencil in the drawer of Damon's table, the old pencil from Chapter 1 that he'd kept there like a small promise. It was still horizontal. It still wasn't a weapon. She shut the drawer and texted Damon a photo of the signatures again, zoomed in to the way Malik's M started, with a tiny hesitation, a second of breath before ink. "Receipts." She wrote, "Receipts," he replied. At midnight, in a room with a carpeting pattern that looked like good intentions, Whitaker met Harlan. Their voices had the clipped heat of men who had gotten used to gravity doing what they paid it to do. "You said they'd spook the pilots with AI." Whitaker hissed. "I said fear is cheap and fast." Harlan answered, "I didn't say it beats a worker trust and a captain on video." "Sec?" Whitaker asked. Harlan swallowed a word that started with D and ended with it. We'll lawyer. I'll remind you who your client is." He stood, fast enough to knock his chair back an inch. "Air," he muttered, and walked into a night that hadn't asked to hold him. In Queens, Rosa's mother fell asleep in her chair with a glue stick in her lap. Her sink was clean. The mean note had dissolved. Just little wet flakes gone down a drain. In Dallas, Captain Coles ironed the shirt he'd wear for the morning broadcast. He turned the iron off with his thumb and said out loud to the hotel lamp, "Heads up," just to hear the phrase in a quiet room. In the glass box, Damon stared at a sentence in his notebook and didn't change it. "Make room for the person who will replace you." He closed the book and left the pencil horizontal, restful. Still the truest motif he owned. The screens dimmed to night cycle. The city outside breathed like a machine, rediscovering it was made of lungs. Somewhere, a rumor tripped, looked back at the footprint it had left, and understood it had been measured. 2 weeks had become 1. The court would get its report, the SEC would get its exhibits, the union would get names on a charter, and a plane at gate C-14 would board late, because a gate agent took 10 extra seconds to say to a passenger with his jaw set wrong, "You don't owe me a story, but if you've got one, I've got time." The man would shake his head and hand over a boarding pass that was absolutely valid. The agent would scan it without commentary. The beeping sound would be the same as it ever was, but everyone would hear it like a small amen. They were not out of the storm. They weren't meant to be. Storms didn't end. They passed. People learned to fly through them, and sometimes to name them. The last thing Damon saw before sleep was the worker trust charter on his screen, the signatures waiting for morning. The last thing he heard was his mother's voice on voicemail, reminding him to eat something that crunched. The last thing he felt was an absence where fear used to sit, not because danger had left, but because courage had asked for its seat back and been given it. Seat 1 Ampere belonged to no one now. It was a place to sit while you did the next right thing. The conference room wasn't wood-paneled power. It was fluorescent honesty, drop ceiling, government clock, coffee in a stainless urn that tasted like compliance. The SEC seal watched from the far wall, an eagle mid-swoop, talons out, as if it had finally remembered what it was for. Damon didn't sit at the head of the table. There wasn't one. He took a middle chair beside Ava and Hal, elbows away from the legal pads, like he'd learned how not to crowd a witness. Across from them, the lead investigator, Aria Lynn, hair in a blunt cut, eyes that filed what they saw, set a red folder on the laminate and clicked her pen. No preamble. Let's start with the channel you labeled reputation risk. She turned the printout so the room could read the same sentences at the same time. Push the scoring angle. Makes it sound Minority Report. Then trades on. Hubris space? Exhibits were obtained legally, she asked without looking up. Yes, Hal said, from a protected tip line and from our own telemetry. We didn't hack anyone. Good, Arya said, and meant good, like a lever, not a compliment. Mr. Washington, were you at any time short the airline's stock while this messaging was being seeded? No, Damon said. We doubled our long position after we made our demands public. He slid a statement across. Numbers have a way of making sentences sit up straight, Arya read, then capped her pen, which felt like a small ceremony. All right, we'll handle the market manipulation angle from here. She closed the red folder. Now your side. Ava counted her breath silently. 4 in, 4 out, then set their version on the table. The heads-up operational note with the pilot signatures. The opt-in language underlined, the line item where the captain could kill the system with a thumb press and be thanked for doing so. Photos of the committee at the whiteboard. Malik's signature hesitation captured like a heartbeat caught on paper. Arya studied the pages, then looked up at Ava. They'll call this spin, she said, not unkindly. Then they can watch the meeting. Ava replied. We recorded it, with consent. Arya's mouth twitched into something that might have been the ghost of a smile. Consent. Imagine that, behind them, a door opened with the soft arrogance of someone who expected rooms to make room. Whitaker stepped in with a lawyer 2 steps behind, and the expression of a man who'd never once held a paper cup that wasn't brought to him. He didn't look at Damon or Ava. He looked at the woman with the pen and tried a charm he'd purchased wholesale years ago. Ms. Lynn, I'm sure we can clear up any. Arya raised one finger. It wasn't rude. It was precise. Not your turn. He swallowed the rest of his sentence, then sat. It took effort. His thigh bounced once, twice. Arya nodded to Hal. Please describe the canary phrase protocol. Hal did. Gently. The way you explain to a jury that a lock only opens to the right combination. 3 drafts. 3 seed phrases. 3 predictable leaks. The blog post with score customer behavior circled in red, like a coach diagramming a busted play. Whitaker's lawyer leaned forward. This is circumstantial. Arya didn't look at him. It's corroborative, she said. You'll get your turn. She turned a page. Mr. Whitaker, do you deny forwarding draft language to any outside party not on the circulation list? A vein in his temple twitched. I shared concerns with an independent advisory firm the company has used for. Not responsive, Arya said. Yes or no? He chose neither. He chose condescension in a suit. Ms. Lynn, you may not appreciate how modern communications work at scale, and you may not appreciate how subpoenas work at speed, Arya said, pen poised, voice steady. Yes or no? He blinked, the way a person blinks when they realize the conversation has a floor, and they've been speaking from a stepladder. I forwarded a draft for informal feedback, he said finally. No malicious intent. Intent is for later, Arya said. Writing. Transmission is for now. In the corner, a camera hummed, as it archived everyone's posture. Damon kept his face in neutral. Ava kept her hands open on the table, palms up, a small theology of nothing to hide. Harlan didn't come. His counsel called in, voice smoothed by a long microphone and a long billing rate. Arya let the audio sit on the speaker like a cold bowl. "Mr. Kincaid, we have Slack messages under your handle, using the phrase, trades on. Were you aware of any short positions opened by funds under your influence after the scoring story was seeded? I can't speak to client positions," the voice said, warm as ash. "Nor would they be material." Arya pressed the pen cap onto her pen. "Will determine a materiality." She slid the red folder to one side, like it had measured out its use for the day. "Will notify counsel of next steps." She stood. So did everyone else. In the hallway, the air felt cooler. Damon exhaled like he'd been holding breath for a month and hadn't noticed. "You did well," Hal said, "and it meant you didn't swing at a pitch high and outside." "Not over," Ava said. "Nothing worth it ever is," Hal said, and tucked the edge of the red folder under his arm like a spare rib. "News breaks in two ways, like glass and like dawn. This one did both." The SEC announced an inquiry into whether market rumors had been weaponized to move stock for profit. The word weaponized made for good Chiron. The phrase to move stock made for good phone calls between people who measure afternoons by basis points. The union posted Taryn's clip. Pilots started responding with their own 40-second monologues, recorded in crew rooms and kitchens and the front seat of parked cars. "I flew through fatigue once. Never again." The ping's a shoulder tap, not a shackle. "We already use checklists to save our lives. One more won't kill us." On the company feed, Rosa introduced the Ombuds team 5 names and faces that weren't corporate stock art. Joel from Miami. Anaya, a gate agent who'd stopped a boarding meltdown by offering a Snickers and a chair. Qasim, maintenance, who could hear an engine lie by the 3rd minute of spool. Real phones next to their real names. Then Damon posted a 4-sentence note that read like a will. "Today I am delegating all cabin-facing dignity protocols to the Worker Trust Council. I will not overrule their votes. I am also stepping aside as CEO to become executive chair, focused on governance and accountability. Seat 1 Ampere belongs to whoever earns it by service that day." The last line landed like a latch clicking into place. Some investors panicked. Briefly, some cheered. Loudly. Most waited for the stock price to tell them how to feel. It did what complicated things often do. It dipped. Then rose. Then settled into a new normal that looked less like a pulse and more like a heartbeat learning a rhythm. Carmen stood beside Damon at the internal town hall when he said it out loud. "I hired a leader to run the day-to-day," he said, and stepped aside so the camera could find her. A chorus of private chats across the company lit up with versions of Rosa, and "Please say Rosa," and "It should be Rosa," and "Then it is." She took the mic in hands that had signed incident reports at 3 a.m. and held crying strangers in terminals at 3:05. "I'm not fancy," she said, and the hangar laughed the warm way. "I come from Gates and Galley and a mother who taped notes under sinks for people who forgot their kindness. I know what we ask you to do when a person gets on a plane with the worst day of their life sitting on their shoulders like luggage. I will not let a checklist become a cudgel. I will not let a tool talk louder than a human. I will ask you to learn one more thing, and I will take the heat for making you learn it." She looked into the camera like it was an only child. "You have my number. Use it like a spare oxygen mask." People started crying in living rooms and crew rooms in cities whose airports all smell different, but somehow the same. In a windowless office, 6 floors above an advisory firm, that suddenly found its reception area emptier than a virtue after a lie. A junior analyst sat with her resignation already sent and watched a message board fill with words like harvested fear and short into rumor. She closed her laptop, stood up, and for the first time in 2 years didn't apologize as she walked out. The hearing wasn't a trial, but it wore the shape of one: cameras, microphones, a dais of nameplates as straight as a ruler. The House Subcommittee on Aviation and Consumer Protection convened under a title that had been workshopped to death: Bias and Safety in the Skies. Captain Isaiah Coles wore the same blue suit he'd been married in, because vows meant things. He spoke first. "I've turned off a lot of things in my life," he said. "I've turned off an engine. I've turned off a cockpit light to see stars. I've turned off 1,000 alarms that were screaming about nothing. I will turn off heads up. If it screams about nothing, so will the pilots behind me. But if it taps my shoulder at the right time, I'll listen, because I am not too proud to be human." A congressman tried to make it about algorithms and woke this or that. Isaiah looked at him the way flight instructors look when cadets ask if the plane will fly itself. "Sir," he said, "the plane never flies itself. Neither will this." Ava took the table after him. She didn't cry when she told the panel about the parking garage. She didn't turn a personal into a prop. She laid it on the table the way you set down a tool. This is what happens when you make a woman a character. In your rumor, she gets knocked to concrete. So here's the policy we wrote while the bruise was still purple. We don't leak drafts to friends of the company. We don't brief the press off the record about active design. We publish checklists with signatures, or we don't publish at all. We don't let fear earn overtime. Whitaker came last. He tried contrition, then defensiveness, then an anecdote about his father's time in the industry that he thought might humanize him. The committee counsel held up a blown-up print of his Slack message. "Push the scoring angle." The font didn't blink. He reached for indignation like a jacket that didn't fit anymore. "I forwarded a draft the way everyone does. Not everyone's draft becomes a talking point for a short trade." The chairwoman said, "Sir, there's a line between feedback and sabotage. You stepped over it and tracked dirt onto our carpet." Harland never appeared. His counsel pleaded the calendar. The chairwoman announced subpoenas anyway. When the gavel hit cedar at the end, it sounded like a door closing on a hallway people had been lost in for too long. There are versions of victory that taste like metal. This one tasted like paper and coffee and the salt of someone's tears you don't need to be ashamed of. In the weeks that followed, the company's internal site filled with mundane proof that culture had shifted by degrees. A gate agent letting a man cry at the counter for 20 seconds before asking for his ID, a pilot walking back to thank a flight attendant in front of a full cabin on the intercom, not for show but for muscle memory, a maintenance lead putting a laminated card over a sensor that kept pinging wrong and scribbling with a Sharpie. "If it lies, it D's, call Q." There were losses, too. They were quiet and not all noble. A senior vice president resigned to spend more time with family, which meant he didn't like being told he needed the worker trust's vote to push a branding initiative through. A beloved line captain took a leave because Heads Up reminded him of a night 10 years ago when he'd missed a checklist item and a good friend had caught it, and the memory clanged against the present like chain on steel. He came back 2 months later with a new schedule and a note he slid under Isaiah's hotel door. "I had to make peace with being saved by other people." Isaiah pinned it inside his closet like a uniform part. And then there was Damon's cost. "You don't step down from the seat without something in you stepping down." 2. He felt it the first morning he didn't unlock the glass box with his code. The badge still opened the door. Executive chair is still executive, but Rosa's desk was the one with traffic. And that was by design. He sat in the corner office and looked at the skyline that had taught him ambition, and then humility, and then the choreography of both. On his table, the old pencil lay where he'd left it, horizontal, unsharpened. A small rebellion against the idea that every tool must be honed until it can cut. He touched it the way you touch a scar you no longer hate. Then he slid it into the drawer, not as hiding but as storage. He would take it out when he needed to remember that power is something you put down so someone else can pick up a piece of it. He walked out into the corridor without fanfare. A gate agent coming off break recognized him and stuck out a hand. "You gave me a union rep with a phone number," she said. "Who does that?" "Everyone." "Now," he said, "if we do this right?" She nodded, a practical blessing, and kept moving. Lines can't run on reverence. They run on steps. In Queens, Rosa's mother, who had finally thrown away the glue stick, watched her daughter on the 6 o'clock news introduce an ombuds hotline in Spanish. She kissed the television screen like superstition, then laughed at herself and said a prayer anyway. In Memphis, a grandmother in row 21D, on a flight to meet a new baby, asked a young flight attendant for hot water to steep her own tea bag. The attendant brought the cup with both hands, and when the plane hit a bump, she steadied the cup with her thumb, her face soft with care that had nothing to do with protocols. Somewhere in the cabin, a sensor noted a vibration, and the system did not ping because not all alerts are dangers. Some are just life. It would be elegant if the world ended cleanly after a gavel and a press conference. It doesn't. At Terminal C 14 days later, a woman in a red coat cut the boarding line, and a man in a faded ball cap told her to get to the back. Her jaw set the way. A jaw sets before a bad hour. The agent at the scanner glanced at Heads Up, which sat as an icon on his monitor like a seatbelt light, and felt the micro-urge to escalate hard. He did what Rosa had written into the handbook under "Before you touch your radio." He stepped out from behind the counter until his shoes were on the same tile as theirs and said, "You don't owe me a story, but if you've got one, I've got time." "She thinks she's better than the rules," Ballcap said. Redcoat closed her eyes. The lids trembled. "My mother is dying," she said, voice flat from using it up. "I got the call in the Uber. I wasn't thinking about lines." The agent didn't apologize for the rule. He applied the exceptions printed in black on page 5, right next to purpose. He walked her down the lane and put her boarding pass under glass. "Safe flight," he said, and meant, "I hope you get there before that last breath." Ballcap watched it happen, his anger deflating like a thing you forget to feed. He took off his cap and rubbed the sweat line where the brim bit into skin, then put it back on and said, to no one in particular, "All right." Nobody recorded it. Nobody needed to. One quiet change has a way of repeating without cameras. It's slower than outrage, but it sticks. At the top of an hour that used to belong to him, Damon walked past seat 1 Ampere on an overnight to Seattle. It was occupied by a woman with a ponytail and a scar at her temple that read like a paragraph. Rosa had insisted he fly coach on his first trip as not CEO, not as an austerity measure, but as an orientation. "Go hear the plane again," she'd said, pressing a ticket into his palm like a sacrament. He stopped at the row for just long enough to say hello and congratulations, and the woman smiled. The smile of someone whose to-do list had replaced adrenaline with intention. "Keep your phone off," she said. "You're a passenger now." "I'm learning," he said. "Good," she said, and turned to the cockpit with a checklist in her hand. He kept moving toward 12C, where Ava was already buckled, a paperback in her lap. She didn't look up as he slid in. She reached into the seat-back pocket, pulled out a pencil golf-length dull and set it across the plastic tray, horizontal, a crooked little grin curving one side of her mouth. "You stole that," he said. "I liberated it from a reconciliation budget," she said. "It's a symbol, not a supply." He laughed. "Kid, the way you do when your rib cage remembers. It can move that direction." The plane pushed back. The safety demo played. The headline crawl on the overhead screens ran another story about the SEC inquiry turns criminal, about subpoenas and a resignation and a fund that had lost more money in a month than it had made in a year. Harlan's face wasn't on the screen yet, but his name was. Whitaker's statement scrolled at the bottom, an apology that said the right words with the wrong music. Self-destruction is never fireworks. It's a man tripping over his own certainty, a fund swallowed by the margin it mispriced, a Slack message enlarged until it doesn't fit the mouth that wrote it. The camera doesn't care if you meant it. It only cares if you did it. The market doesn't care if you're sorry. It only cares if it can price your sorry. Somewhere over Indiana, the cabin lights dimmed. The engine murmur settled into the pitch you can fall asleep to, if your life lets you. Ava closed her eyes. Damon set the pencil on his tray and didn't touch it again. It lay there like a small, stubborn truth, unchanged by altitude. He could feel the question forming, the one that would never be finished. Was it worth it? The costs wouldn't stop arriving. Some would have zeros. Some would have faces. He had given away a crown in exchange for a covenant. He had made room for the person who would replace him, and found that person was not one person at all, but a noisy council of people who carried coffee and wrenches and strollers and sometimes a glue stick in their pockets. The seatbelt sign stayed on through a patch of light chop. No one rang a call button to complain. A flight attendant steadied a cup with her thumb, the same thumb that would one day sign off on a new training module or dial the ombuds. When a supervisor forgot how to be human. On the ground in Seattle, at 2:14 a.m. local time, an email would hit Rose's inbox from a first-time captain who had turned off heads-up on climb because it pinged too early, and then turned it back on at cruise because he missed its tap on his shoulder more than he expected. He would end it with, "Thank you for not wiring pride into the circuit." She would reply at 5:32 a.m. with 3 words, "Thank you back." In the air, the pencil didn't roll even when the plane did. Ava's book slid an inch. Damon's thoughts slid a mile. The pencil stayed. There would be other incidents, other hangars, other rooms with drop ceilings and coffee that tasted like somebody else's choices. There would be a day when a person in a red coat cut the line and nobody asked why because they remembered a story that wasn't theirs. There would be a night when a rumor tried to dress itself as a leak and found the tailor gone. There would be a seat somewhere 1 ampere or 34 farads or the edge of a bed at 3 a.m. where someone decided not to let fear earn overtime, where someone turned a tool off and chose a human, where someone pressed a button that said override and did. The engines hummed. The aisle light winked. The pencil held its horizontal ground like a tiny beam across a tiny span the size of a tray table. The plane kept going into the country-sized dark through air already named and air that had never heard its own name out loud. You don't end a storm. You fly through it and leave your shape behind for those who follow. You're not the hero every day. Some days you're the person who steadies a cup with your thumb. Some days you're the person who puts the pencil down and refuses to sharpen it into a spear. Some days that's the bravest thing a person can do. At its heart, this story reminds us that dignity is not a perk. It's a birthright. Real power isn't the loudest voice in the room. It's the steady choice to act with fairness when no one's grading your paper. We see how everyday slights can snowball into systems and how one careful, courageous response can turn a bad moment into a better future. The lesson is practical. When you face bias or bullying at work, in travel, in family, don't let shame or anger make the first move. Name what's happening. Ask for the facts to be checked. Invite witnesses to truth. Choose accountability over humiliation. True gold doesn't fear the fire, and character shows up over the long haul. What we plant are habits, words, and policies we eventually harvest. For those of us who are older, seasoned by miles and losses, this is also a call to mentor the moment. Small courtesies, pausing before you judge, asking one more question, offering a seat or a kind word, become guardrails for the next traveler. Institutions don't change because we shout. They change because we show up, insist on clarity, and keep receipts. Justice need not be vengeful to be strong. Respect can be firm without being cruel. And community begins when we decide to see one another whole. I'd love to hear how this landed with you. What part of the story spoke to your own life? Share your thoughts, or a time you challenged unfairness with grace. If this resonated, please tap like Bennett's and subscribe so you don't miss future stories that carry both heat and light. May your week be steady, your steps sure, and your moments of turbulence brief. Here's to quiet courage, kinoskis, and the calm that follows when we choose what's right.